Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the Special Finance and Audit Committee meeting to order. Our clerk today will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. I'd ask for a procedural motion to proceed in camera. Moved, Councillor Bonner. Seconded, Councillor Hemmons. All those Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you to the April 14th Special Finance and Audit Committee meeting. I'd like to first recognize that we are on the traditional territory of the Sineamic First Nation. Our clerk today will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. Today's Special Finance and Audit Committee meeting will be held in accordance with the Community Charter, Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272, and Ministerial Order number M192 governing open meetings during a state of emergency, and the Provincial Health Officer Order regarding gatherings and events. Therefore, members of the public are required to observe meetings virtually and not attend in person, and question period will be suspended throughout the duration of the Provincial Health Orders in effect. And the first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. Ms. Gurry, please.
Thank you, Worship. For late items this morning, we are replacing PowerPoint presentation slides in Agenda Item 6B, the 2021 to 2025 Financial Plan Update. We have also reordered Agenda Item 7B, which is titled Freezing Property Tax Revenues for Business Case Properties, to actually be an attachment to Item 6B, which is the 2021 to 2025 Financial Plan Update. It is an informational report, and it is part of that PowerPoint slide, so it is now attached to that PowerPoint for information. Thank you, Your Worship.
Eminently sensible, thank you. A motion for approval of the agenda is amended. Moved, Councillor Hemmons, seconded, Councillor Martman. All those in favour? Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved, Councillor Thorpe, seconded, Councillor Bonner. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. And the first item under presentations is KPMG 2020 Financial Statement of Audit Presentation. Liette Bates-Emer and Sarah Burden, Chartered Professional Accountants, KPMG, presenting via Zoom. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. Your Worship, will we be able to see our presentation on Zoom so I can speak to it?
Yes.
Perfect.
Excellent. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so can we advance to the first slide there? In terms of our audit status, as of today, we have completed our audit. We received full cooperation from management, received all of the support we needed to perform our audit virtually this year. We anticipate signing a clean audit opinion on the date that the Council approves the financial statement. The last few steps in our audit will be obtaining our signed management representation letter and confirming that there are no subsequent events up to the date that we sign our opinion. And go to the next slide. When we presented our plan to council, we did identify one area of risk, which was required by professional standards, which is fraud risk due to management override of controls. We have addressed this risk through our journal entry testing and found no issues. We're satisfied that this risk has been mitigated. In terms of the areas of audit focus that we had planned to address in our audit, tangible capital assets, developer contributed assets, cash and investments, revenue receivables management, salaries and benefits, expenses, and impacts of COVID-19. We have addressed all of these areas of the audit with no significant findings to report. Next slide, please. In terms of the audit response to impacts of COVID-19, we will just report that we were able to perform substantive analytical procedures over the most significant areas of impact in the financial statement, which was declines in certain revenues due to COVID, specifically recreation program revenue, casino revenue, and the conference center revenue. So we are satisfied that these amounts have been reported accurately. We did work with management to sort of customize note disclosure related to COVID-19, which you'll see in note 24 to the financial statement. Next slide, please. There was a new auditing standard that we reported to you when we presented our plan. This standard relates to auditing accounting estimates. So for the city's audit this year, this new standard did apply to the audit of your estimated employee future benefit obligations. We did take a closer look at the calculation of your employee benefit obligations that are performed by an actuary and, followed the new sort of guidance for how to audit these types of estimates. And we have found no issues with the amounts being reported. Next slide, please. We can report that there were no uncorrected audit differences and no audit differences that were corrected that impacted the statement of financial position or the statement of operations. There was one minor adjustment in the disclosures for contractual rights for $330,000 reduction in contractual rights that were disclosed. We typically have minor sort of adjustments or not adjustments, but disclosure recommendations for best practices and minor items that were fixed by management. Next slide, please. We have issued a management letter for the current year, which discusses that we did not identify any new control deficiencies for the city. There was one item in the prior year's management letter related to sort of adopting a new travel and expense report policy. There was no issues with expenses going through on expense reports, and the amounts were being approved. It was just that in the matrix of who was to approve what, it wasn't in line with the new policy. So the teams were educated on who needs to sign what, and when we came back and looked at that this year, there were no issues with who was signing expense reports. So nothing new to report there. Lastly, I'll just mention, you can go to the next slide, I'll just mention that the team that we worked with there did a great job of preparing for the audit, and it was a clean, smooth process in this virtual new environment. So thanks to everyone there. That's it from me.
Thank you very much. On behalf of Ms. Legan, Ms. Mercer, Ms. Fuller, and the team who work with them, we appreciate your kind words about them. We're very proud of our city staff. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, thank you, ladies, very much. I just have one question, and I ask it every year because I think it needs to be asked publicly, even though we've heard your presentation. And the question is this: did you, during the audit, find any concerns or irregularities that Council should be aware of?
No, we did not. Nothing that we haven't reported.
And that's always the answer I'm hoping for. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. This is a question actually unrelated to the audit, but the way you did the audit. And you mentioned that it was done all virtually. And we're looking at ways of economic development in our city. Going forward, in future years, is providing these audits virtually something that you may consider continuing to do? And I'm looking at it as a general concept in businesses of working virtually. Is that something you might consider doing in the future as well?
Yes, where it works for our clients, we absolutely have figured out how to be doing audits virtually, and safely with, secure file transfer platforms, increased level of professional skepticism around virtual evidence versus original documents. This can absolutely be done in the future if that is, sort of the way that our clients would like. We obviously miss seeing people and the efficiencies from being able to walk down the hall and talk to our clients and resolve any audit issues. But we've figured out how to do that also virtually, phone calls, Teams meetings, Zoom meetings. So yeah, absolutely can be done going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bonner. Anyone else? Seeing no further questions, thank you very much. Appreciate your attendance this morning and your work.
Thank you. Okay. Goodbye, everyone.
The next item is the 2021-2025 financial plan update. Ms. Leggin, please.
Thank you, Your Worship and committee. We have, this is the chunky bit of the agenda for the day, I suspect. We have a primary objective, and that is to arrive at a final 2021-2025 financial plan. We've structured this presentation so that we're going to walk you through it, so you get the big picture and then circle back and deal with each of the decision points in that manner. And I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Mercer right away so that she can keep her train of thought going, and because it's a very complex effort, a lot of work behind the scenes from Ms. Fuller and her team as well, and we'd like you to recognize that decisions that need to be taken today to arrive at a final are key, and those that could be postponed to the next couple of meetings would be very much appreciated so that we can finalize this under required mandate. Thank you.
Ms. Leggin, thank you very much. I don't mean this unkindly. You haven't gilded the lily this morning because it is a big project and the work is much appreciated, and there's a lot for council to think about. Ms. Mercer, good morning.
Thank you, Your Worship. So today I'll provide you with an update to all the changes that have been made to the budget since the provisional was passed in January. And like Ms. Leggin said, the goal of today is to finalize the plan so staff can come back with a bylaw and have it for first three readings on May 3rd and adoption on May 10th for both the financial plan and the property tax bylaw. And to reiterate again, I would also like to remind the committee that changes can be made to the financial plan after May 15th if the funding source isn't taxation. So anything that requires taxation as funding needs to be resolved today. So this means that discussion on spending funds for items that can be funded from reserves, like your special initiatives reserve, do not have to happen today. Those can happen at future dates. And we're also planning a capital project presentation at the next Finance and Audit Committee meeting in May. And so discussion around funding options of those projects can happen at the May 19th meeting. Oh, I guess I need a little clicker. So I'll just do a quick recap. Everybody knows how we got here, but we'll go over it. Back in November and December, business plans for each department were presented to the committee, and we also presented our draft financial plan for 2021 to 2025. So in December, we held our e-town hall meeting that gives the public an opportunity to engage with council on their thoughts on the budget. And then in January, council adopted the financial plan, which we refer to as the provisional budget. So where did we land after all these changes? So since the adoption of the provisional budget, staff have been busy updating it to reflect changes in estimates and directives from council. So these changes bring us to the current projected tax increase of 2.8%. So that's 1% for asset management reserve and a 1.8% increase for a general property tax increase. And so based on this information we have today, the estimated percentage increases for 2022 to 2025 are also listed. So some of the major assumptions that are in the budget for 2021 and 2022 are, for 2021, we've assumed that this is a pandemic year. And so no funding for casino is included, and a lower than normal Parks, Rec and Culture and parking operations are incorporated into there. We have limited employee expenses relating to travel and conferences and et cetera, those things, as we will not be doing those this year. And we've projected that growth will be $1.2 million. So our standard is 1.2 for growth in all 5 years of the plan, and that's a conservative estimate. It's based on an average. This year we did receive more than 1.2, which was considerably higher than we have received in many years. So those are the assumptions for 2021. In 2022, we've assumed that this is a recovery year, so it's a new normal. So their casino and investment income is budgeted at 75% of pre-pandemic levels, and that goes back up to 100% in 2023. It is assumed that parking and Parks and Rec and Culture revenues are back to normal in 2022. Again, growth estimated at 1.2 million, and all service levels are maintained, so there's no service reduction. So these percentages are based on what information we have today and for the future years. So council has used a significant amount of reserves to help offset the effects of COVID and keep the tax increase low for 2021. And this gives a tax relief to all residents within Nanaimo. And as this is not a permanent revenue source, future year tax increases are affected when this funding source drops off. And this is one of the main drivers of the 2022 to the 2024 tax increases. And also any decisions made today will also impact these percentages as well. So for 2022, just to comment on 21 and 22, the main driver for the increase in 2022 is a drop of $1 million in reserve funding. And we have 1.8 million approximate of reserve funding to lower taxes in 2021, and that goes down to 800 in 2022. So this slide shows that how the property tax increases have been over the last 10 years, and the average over the last 10 years is approximately 2.4%. So just a couple of items to keep in mind when you're looking at this chart is in 2009, council policy to reduce the industrial tax rate to the same level as commercial was undertaken and completed in 2014. So with the last year of the shift in 2013. So this reduction in industrial rates had an increased effect on the residential tax rates. So in order to bring those industrial rates down to be in line with the Class 6 business rates, that money had to go somewhere, and it was picked up by the residents. And this shift was done to lessen the impact on our tax base if we lost a major industrial taxpayer, which was Harmac. And in 2013, the implementation of a 1% annual increase for the General Asset Management Reserve was started, and it was extended in 2017 to 2022, and then it was extended again in 2020 to 2027, or whenever the next asset management update occurs, which is underway currently. In 2016, the city began showing the Vancouver Island Regional Library as a collection for other governments. So prior to 2016, it was included in our general tax increase. And as we have no control over that, it was pulled out and put into other governments. So what does 2.8% increase mean for a typical house? So what you will see is this table shows the impact on a typical single-family home with a value of approximately $544,000. And the taxes and user fees paid on this house would be approximately $3,262, or a $130 increase over 2020. So this property would pay $2,289 in property taxes, and that's an increase of $63. They pay $638 in water user fees, and that's a $44 increase. And this is based on a house using 220 gallons a day. Sewer, you would pay $146 for the year, and that's a $5 increase. And finally, sanitation would pay $189, and that's an increase of $18. So all of those add up to a $130 increase for the year.
Ms. Mercer, before we go any further, can you comment, or anyone comment? I'm assuming these are based on the assessment. Obviously, that's how you arrive at 532 versus 544. Do we have any idea, though, whether there's been a, how shall I say, a larger lift in properties below that average price and not as much of a lift in properties above? Because you know what I'm getting at. I mean, if higher properties jump substantially and lower properties don't, the burden, and we'll hear the screams from the happy homeowners saying, gee, I'm paying so much more than your 2.8, and where the heck does that come from?
Yes, so what we do is we take the assessment value for single-family homes, and we take the number of properties, and that's how we come up with our average or our typical home. And yes, if your property increased more than 2.2% for the year, you will pay slightly more, or depending on how much more you are. If your property went up 10% in value, you're going to pay substantially more than $63. But if your property went down in value, then you would pay less than that $63. So it really depends. There's so many moving parts with taxes that it's hard to just isolate a simple, but this is the best way we can show it.
No, and I appreciate that, but I'm just asking if you can comment, and I don't expect you can necessarily, but I'm just curious to know, you know, has the $400,000 house in Nanaimo gone up 20% this year, and the $1 million house gone up 5%, or do we have any idea where the trends are in terms of values, which will have an impact on the...
I don't have that information off the top of my head. All we know is that the average change was 2.2%.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bonner?
Thank you, Worship. I did a fair amount of research on that last year. And if things are similar as they were last year, properties that tended to be over $800,000, many declined in their overall property taxes. And so as a result, they actually had less than, and some had even no tax increase. And typically areas of South Nanaimo and areas of the lower income were going up drastically, 30–40% sometimes. So it made a bit of a difference. If I may have a question, Ms. Mercer, if I'm looking back at the slide that has the average tax increase over the 10 years, if we instead of doing this roller coaster ride we just did, if we had 2.4% starting at year one and going 2.4% each year, would we have more money sort of in the bank now than by doing it this way? It's probably just a mathematical question, but I'm just curious.
It depends on what we need to, how much money we need to spend on the year, how much revenue we need to generate from taxes to run the city. So it could, if we were consistent, if we kept up with the cost of inflation on the cost of goods we purchase, and barring any substantial adds to the budget for positions or projects and whatnot, yeah, we could, you will probably not see these big swings.
Well, I guess my couldn't answer the question correctly. No, I didn't ask it correctly.
Okay.
You answered it correctly. If we went with the 2.4% each year, year after year after year, would we have more tax revenue today than we would do now? Would our tax revenue be more? I'm thinking so, correct?
Because it's heavily weighted on the right, so yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I thought.
because
yeah.
there is years where we didn't need the full 2.4%, right? So, yeah, we would have more money to kind of smooth that out, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So the $2,289 that's collected in property taxes is spent as follows. So $1,900 pays for city services, and this excludes water and sewer services, as those are paid for through user fees. So this provides services that make Nanaimo a desirable place to live, and these are items such as trail maintenance, pool and arena operations, snow removal, fire, police, all of those kind of services. $229 goes to pay for reserve fund contributions. So this includes contributions to the asset management reserve, equipment depreciation, photocopier reserves, those items. And this helps to fund replacement of assets when they reach end of life. And these reserves help to smooth out tax increases, so we don't see large spikes when replacement is needed. $125 funds 2021 projects. So approximately $6.4 million was used from property taxes to fund these projects. So projects such as the OCP, Parks, Rec and Culture Master Plan, condition assessment programs are things that are funded through these projects. And finally, $35 funds the 2021 debt. And that represents 3 long-term borrowings, one for the Port of Nanaimo Centre, and that includes this conference centre, the Cranberry Fire Hall, which is station number 4, and the waterfront walkway. So our plan assumes that we have a fall borrowing starting in 2021, and though that debt starts to be needing to be repaid. We also have some other notes regarding debt. Is the debt on the Nanaimo Aquatic Center retired in 2020, so that dropped off. And we also have some non-property tax debt that's funded from non-property tax sources. And fire station number 1, which is funded from the General Asset Management Reserve. We have automated garbage collection, short-term borrowing for carts and trucks, and that's funded through sanitation user fees. We also have some debt on the water treatment plant, and that's funded through water user fees. And lastly, we have some internal borrowing for sewer DCC projects, and that's funded through sewer user fees. So when we look at how the $1,900 for city services is broken down by department, you will get the following. So our biggest item is the RCMP, and my eyesight is a little bit bad today, but that's $477, and it's followed closely at $400 for Parks, Rec and Culture. Then we have $299 for the fire rescue and 911. And corporate services is $234, and this includes costs for finance, the GM, IT, police support services, emergency management, committed contingencies, grants and aid, and corporate insurance. And and we can go down the list, development services, city administration, and this includes the CAO's office, legal expenses, legislative services, and council, as well as HR. So if you broke these costs down further, it would approximately be $5.21 per day, or $158 for the month. If you like doing math, that's what those break down to. So the next couple of slides will just kind of quickly go through our revenues and our expenditures within the budget. So we have approximately $195.5 million in 2021 revenues, and these fund annual operating and maintenance costs, as well as projects and contributions to infrastructure renewal reserves. So the largest source of funding by far is taxation at 62% of our total revenues. Our next, and that is the most significant revenue source we have for the city. As you can see, the next largest revenue source is our water revenues at 12%. The revenues include the Vancouver Island Regional Library revenues, but it does exclude new borrowing and transfers from reserves to help fund expenditures. Our operational budget, so there is approximately $158.1 million in 2021 for operating expenditures. So the operating budget excludes both operating and capital projects, so those costs are not included in here, as well as the Vancouver Island payover, as that's in other governments. So the RCMP contract is our biggest expenditure item in the budget at 18.8% of our budget, and it is followed closely by Parks, Rec and Culture at 16.7%, and Engineering and Public Works at 16.2%. And then, I don't think I need to make any more comment on that. Corporate services includes the, again, committed contingency, general revenue, post-employment benefits, corporate insurance, hotel tax, and BIA payovers. So the next few slides will summarize all of the changes that have been made since the provisional budget was adopted. So this slide highlights the changes from provisional that affected property taxes. So I'll go through each one of these in a little bit of detail, and hopefully that's clear, but if there's any questions, please let me know. So aquatics, arenas, and recreation operations have been heavily impacted by COVID-19, the COVID-19 pandemic. And as the pandemic is still ongoing, changes were made to Parks, Rec and Culture operations to reflect the most current information. Health and housing initiatives. A motion was made during the provisional budget deliberations to include $480,000 for finals to be funded from taxation. And $100,000 was already in the budget for the daytime drop-in center, and this was repurposed to the health and housing initiatives budget, and this has a net impact of $380,000 increase to the budget for 2021. Corporate insurance premiums came in less than were originally quoted, so we got a little bit of a bonus there. Investment income, so we reviewed our current portfolio, and with all of the latest information from the market, and it's predicting that we will have more income than we originally thought. And that's an increase, it's a positive impact on the budget by $400,000. We added some management consulting, and this is to help funding digital improvements to city services. So there's a project ongoing through IT that this consulting will be used for. The mayor's leadership table came on board in 2021, so we added some budget as these meetings will start shortly, and we've budgeted accordingly. So parking operations, so like Parks, Rec and Culture operations, the COVID pandemic has also affected parking. And parking revenue levels are lower than we expected, and as such, we had to go back in and adjust the budget to reflect that information. So that was a negative impact to the budget of just over $109,000. Funding was added to bring the RCMP fleet inventory to adequate levels, and these units were funded partially by taxation and partially by the RCMP contract reserve. The next item is the RDN Recreation Service, or Recreation Sharing Agreement. So this agreement has the RDN paying for specific city facilities and sports fields. So the payment calculation for this agreement is based on prior year actuals. So as COVID has impacted 2020 Parks, Rec and Culture operations, it has impacted our 2021 RDN payover for these facilities. The Soroxman Stadium maintenance was added to the budget. So as the Soroxman Amateur Baseball Association advised the city that they would no longer be able to maintain and operate the stadium, the city needed to add this into the budget for 2021. So that's what that line item represents. And the line that says special initiatives reserve funding to reduce taxes to 3%. So a motion was made during provisional budget deliberations to use funding from the special initiatives reserve up to $400,000 to keep the tax increase at 3%. So as such, $355,400 was funded from this reserve at provisional. As the tax increase came in below 3%, this revenue source wasn't needed anymore, so it was removed. And that's why you see that increase to the budget. And finally, growth came in at just over $2 million, which, like I mentioned earlier, is quite substantially more than what we normally see in growth. So we had an increase of $836,700 over our $1.2 million that we had budgeted. So it's a nice problem to have, and that helped us reduce the tax increase. So all of these,
if I may interrupt, it's a nice problem to have, but, and I don't wish to sound critical, but we were off quite a bit on that prediction, and what accounts for that?
so each year, it's hard to predict what growth is going to be. So we put a standard $1.2 million in the budget because that's kind of where it lands, a little bit more. A couple of years it was a little bit less, but it's generally around within a couple $100,000. This year, it was substantially more than that. And there has been a lot of growth in the city, but we've had growth for a few years and we hadn't seen that reflected in our growth numbers through BC assessment. So we kept our assessment, our amount at what we historically have done. And so this year was the year it caught up. And that's why we didn't reflect that. And to add a little bit of complexity to this, we get a heads up in the fall, which we brought to you, I think, as a report in the fall. We get a preliminary number from BC Assessment, but their assessment had errors in it, and we knew that. And given the fact that it was substantially more than what we had normally seen, we were a little skeptical of whether that amount was actually going to materialize. So we played it conservative, kept our $1.2 million, and waited to see what final would produce. And it was lower by about $150,000, but it was still significantly more than we normally see. So that's why that is such a large number, is we didn't change it when we came for provincial. Even though we had information that said it might be, we were just skeptical because we knew that there was errors that they had fixed. So we played it safe.
Fair to say that the contractors finished their work on various construction sites faster than probably BC assessment anticipated.
And it could be. And so I'm not quite sure what their issue was with their calculation, but yeah, it's now everything is caught up and they're up to date. And so now we're seeing that. So we're not sure what next year is going to look like. It could be higher. In past, we've seen, I think our highest was about $1.8 million that we saw from growth, but the next year it was substantially lower. So we're not quite sure where next year is going to land. So we've kept it at 1.2.
So conservative is good for the coming year. Thank you.
So all of these items
Ramona
amounted.
has a question too.
Oh,
Sorry, Your Worship, if I may. The two items, parking net and RCMP contract fleet units, to me, these seem to be one-off items. Hopefully, parking will be paying for itself next year. And we won't necessarily be buying another fleet unit for the RCMP, although it's quite possible. If we include these in our tax increase, then 1 year from now, we will have $179,000 of revenue that we may not have to allocate to parking or fleet. So we're going to use it for something else. But as my understanding is that if it's a one-off and not in operations, it comes out of a reserve or something along those lines, because in essence, we'll be taxing the public $179,000 2 years from now for something we actually don't have any need for. Well, I know we're going to need it then.
Yeah.
But is this standard use? I mean, to me, because we could reduce our taxes even more
Yeah.
if we didn't include those one-off items.
Through your worship to Councillor Bonner, you are correct that these are hopefully one-year, one-time events, and we could fund those from a reserve source and reduce this further. We've included them as they're operating, but that is an option that they could be funded from reserve.
Okay. I guess that goes back to my earlier point about 2.4% over the whole years, right? So I'm fine with it where it is now. But my other question is the special necessary reserve funding. I'm confused about this part. We were going to use the money to reduce things down to 3%. We didn't need to. So now it looks like it's being added back in as a tax increase.
Through your worship, yes, it is hard to get your mind around it, because in the provisional budget, there was reserve funding for $355,000 to bring it to 3%. But we didn't need that, so we didn't need it because the increase came in below 3%. So we removed that funding source, and instead of, I think it was around 2.6, if we kept it in, somewhere around there, it was below 3%, so we didn't need it, so we removed it. So it does look like it's a tax increase, but we didn't need that funding because the motion said keep it at 3%, so we needed to remove it. So I know you're still looking at me like I've confused you.
Remember my background.
Yeah. It's just that it was a funding source that we no longer needed, so we removed it, and therefore it shows up as a line item. If we kept it in there, the tax increase would be lower, if that, yeah.
Okay, I think I understand that now.
Your Worship, this is an example of where we need to go through the entire presentation. You're going to have a fairly significant conversation as part of this around the taxation and the ask for the business class 6 and that type of thing. And this is an example of using a reserve to affect taxation, but it does ultimately come back at some point in time, because that's not a sustainable level of funding. As far as the RCMP contract fleet, the sizable part of what's being funded actually is in the reserve account for this year, and this was sort of a top-up that made it more of a sustainable funding amount that goes into what they're doing. So, you could fiddle with the numbers a bit, but in essence, this is where we've landed, and we've actually come in at this stage lower than we had ended up thinking we were in. The whole mindset of council was we were over 3% when we finished our work with you in December, and then as it turned out, we came in under because of some of these changes. So, and the final numbers were available. So, I think just the whole issue of the reserves, we're going to, you're going to spend a fair amount of time today talking about that, and so you may end up affecting this conversation as well.
Ms. Mercer, please.
So all of these items amounted to a 0.2% decrease for final, bringing the total tax increase to 2.8%. So again, that's 1% for asset management and 1.8% for a general tax increase. The next two slides highlight the changes from provisional that affected other sources of funding. So the fire adjustment plan that council approved, we used 911 reserve and the general financial stability reserve to smooth the cost impact of this transition over the next 5 years. So as there was some upfront costs, we used those reserves to help smooth that over so we don't see large increases in any 1 year. We also used the general asset management reserve to fund the radio equipment that was identified as being required as part of this change. the Port Theatre chiller renewal. So this project is to replace the existing chiller with a air source heat recovery heat pump system. And this was funded from the General Asset Management Reserve and the Emissions Reduction Reserve, as there is a GHG component, reduction component to this project. The Civic Precinct Study, so phase 2 of the site development study is being undertaken, and the General Capital Reserve is used to fund, was used as a funding source in addition to some money that was already in the budget. And the Beban Pool change room and washroom upgrades. So this was a topic that you discussed at the March 17th Finance and Audit Committee meeting about improvements to that, to the pool. And this project is funded from the Facility Development Reserve, as the pool is a contributor to this reserve for renewal. And then there were several projects that were funded from grants and private contributions that were added to the budget as well. So we have a Microsoft 365 implementation. So in 2021, the city will start to implement the implementation of this Microsoft 365 project. And the majority of costs are operating, as this is a cloud-based system. And some funding was needed for one-time costs for training, and the IT reserve was identified as a fund to fund this one-time cost. We have the ER replacement project. So $60,000 was moved forward in the budget to 2021 and from 2022 to be used for assistance in drafting and evaluating potential vendors for this project. And that was a report that came to council in February. We have a property purchase underway that will be funded from Parkland Dedication Reserve and the Parks DCC Reserve. And we needed some funding for the Wesley Street cleanup. So this funding was for work on the retaining wall and the slope behind the demolished gym on Franklin Street. And this funding will come from PILTs, or payments in lieu of taxes. The downtown transit exchange functional design. So this design is going to be funded from the Strategic Infrastructure Reserve, and as this design is the one-time cost. And finally, the Halliburton sidewalk project. So the funding for the design is in 2021, and it comes currently from the Special Initiatives Reserve, with construction happening in 2022, funded from the same reserve. And so we have a decision slide later in the presentation that talks about moving this funding from the Special Initiatives Reserve to the Community Works Fund. Well, we can talk about that later. And this slide just gives a brief update of the money that council put aside in an internal order for COVID costs. So during the provisional budget sessions, council allocated $500,000 to the internal order to fund ongoing pandemic costs. So to date, we've approximately one half of this money. This $500,000 has been spent or committed on the items listed in this slide. So facility ambassadors, security services, portable toilets, etc., have been funded out of this internal order. So the next several slides outline items for the committee to consider adding to the final financial plan. So I'll go through all of the decision slides first, and then the committee can deliberate at the end. So this way you will get a full view of all of the asks, the reasoning behind them, and then gives you an option to discuss. If you do have questions throughout these slides, please ask, as we have hopefully all of the people here necessary to answer your questions. And the committee will also have a chance to discuss any other items you wish to as well at the end. So our first item is the provision, or the property tax freeze for business class 6. So at the February 17th Finance and Audit Committee meeting, the Nanaimo Chamber of Commerce proposed that council consider freezing the tax rate for business class properties at 2020 levels. So as COVID has impacted all aspects of the economy, the Chamber has asked that tax relief be given to the business class properties, as some have been negatively affected by the pandemic. So the information report attached to the agenda, titled Freezing Property Tax Revenues for Business Class Properties, provides the committee with various scenarios available to accomplish this. So I'm going to reference that report in the next few slides. So First, I will give a brief overview of how tax rates are determined. So a municipality determines how much money they need to raise from property taxes as an overall. If we need $100 million, that's what we have to then calculate tax rates on. So it must then determine how to apportion that tax burden over all of the 9 properties. So how do we divvy it up? And once the tax apportionment to each property class has been determined, the city will then set a tax rate for each class to raise the tax revenue needed to meet its budgetary needs. And tax rates are expressed as a dollar figure per $1,000 of assessed property values. So we take the money we need and base it and calculate a rate dependent on the assessed value of those properties. So the Statement of Revenue Objectives and Policies in our financial plan bylaw states that the City of Nanaimo will attempt to keep the proportional share of revenue from property taxes at levels similar to the average of comparable municipalities. So that's our target. So what this graph shows is how the various classes are weighted as far as their tax revenue. So what you'll see is our Class 1 residential is the largest percentage of our tax revenues at 68%. And with Class 6 business properties at 29%. The other 3% of taxes are then distributed among the remaining 7 classes. So really, the lion's share of properties revenue comes from Class 1 and Class 6, so residential and business. So this is a graphical representation that shows how Nanaimo sits in comparison with like-sized BC municipalities and neighboring communities with regards to their business class ratios. So public discussion regarding comparisons between property classes often refers to tax ratios. So what's the tax ratio between residential and commercial? So a ratio is the tax rate relationship between 2 property classes. And this ratio is calculated by dividing, in this case, the commercial tax rate by the residential tax rate. So for 2020, the tax ratio for business properties in Nanaimo was 2.96. So this indicates that the business tax rate was 2.96 times the residential rate. So they paid 2.96 times more than the residential rate. And this graph and chart in the report shows that Nanaimo currently sits in the middle of the pack. So some are above us, some are below us. And the average ratio for the group was 2.8 for 2020. So we're pretty close. And over the last 5 years, Class 6 business tax revenues have been approximately 28% of the total taxes collected for the City of Nanaimo. So this percentage has ranged from 14 to 47% for the cities listed in the report. So, and with the average for 2020 being 27%, and we averaged 28 for 2020. So this says that the City of Nanaimo is meeting the expectations outlined in the Statement of Revenue Objectives and Policies in our financial plan bylaw. So we are keeping in line with how other like-sized municipalities are levying their taxes as well. So based on the scenarios outlined in the report, this is a summary of the effects that each of the scenarios has on the tax rates in each year of the financial plan. So I'd just like to caution you that this report and all the calculations were based on provisional budget information, as the final budget wasn't completed at the time of drafting the report. And however, it does illustrate how each scenario affects negatively or positively the tax rates. It won't be exact, but it does show you what the impact is. So there are advantages and disadvantages to each scenario. As the city requires a set amount of money to generate through taxes, we need to have a specific amount of money to collect to pay city operations. So this means that as relief is given to one area, we need to pick it up from another. And only a permanent change in non-tax revenue sources will result in no impact in any year of the financial plan. So scenario 1, this represented a shift of approximately $969,000 from business class 6 to residential class 1 in 2021. And then that shifts back to the business class 6 in 2022. So what this means for business class properties is it gives them a break in 2021 to 0%, so they have no increase. But there is a large impact in 2022 as we shift it back. So the provisional budget is projecting 3.4. If you did this scenario in year 2, they would go up to 6.4%. So it's giving them a break this year, but they have to make it up next year. For residential class, it has a large impact in 2021. So it goes from 3% to 4.3, but it gives them relief in 2022. And as the increase goes from the provisional at 3.4 down to 2.2. So they get a break in year 2. They pay more in year 1, but less in year 2. Scenario 2 shifts approximately $969,000 from the business class to residential class permanently. So there is no shifting back of that money to be collected from business class properties. So for business classes, it gives them a break in 2021, again, 0% increase with no impact in future years. So they go back to having the projected provisional increase of 3.4. For a residential class, it has a larger impact in 2021 as their increase rises to 4.3, but it provides no relief in 2022. So we will continue to collect more money from residential class properties onwards in the budget with no shift back to the business class properties. Oops. So scenario 3, we use funding of approximately $969,000 from the Special Initiatives Reserve to fund the business class increase for 2021. So for business classes, it gives a break in 2021, again, 0%. However, all classes will see an increase in 2022 to make up for the revenue shortfall. So that's a 4.3% increase across all classes for 2022. For the residential class properties, there's no impact in 2021, but as I've stated, all classes see an increase in 2022 because we have to make up that reserve funding shortfall. If we added it back all to the business class, again, they would see a significant 6.4% increase because they get a bigger hit in 2022. So our final scenario is using funding of $1 million from the Special Initiatives Reserve to reduce property taxes for all classes over a 4-year period at $250,000 per year. So what this means for the business class properties is it gives them a small break in 2021, and so they drop a bit to a 2.8% increase. However, it does not reduce them to 0 like the request has been from the Chamber. All other classes will see a small tax break as the $1 million is spread over the 4 years. In year 5, you'll see a slight increase as the city would no longer be using reserves to fund this tax reduction. So that shows that taxes are picking it up in year 5. So that's kind of a brief summary. I know it's a bit of a complicated issue. It's not easy to predict what they will be, but we tried to make it as simple as possible, although taxes rarely are ever simple. So the Finance and Audit Committee will need to determine what scenario, if any, they would like to proceed with. So again, I'll go through all of these slides and we can come back and discuss these, or if you have any questions now, I can try to answer them for you. So the next decision point is the Records and Information Specialist. So as you're aware, the city has undertaken a records management project and it is currently underway. This is a very large undertaking, and the Legislative Services Department has found that their current staffing levels are not sufficient to do this project as well as their day-to-day operations. And therefore, a position request has been submitted to ensure that the project stays on track and that the city has sufficient resources to maintain the system once it is implemented in the future. So this is an ongoing operational item, and as such, the funding source would be general taxation. So with a start date of July 1st, this would be an approximate 0.04 increase for both 21 and 22. So Ms. Gray is here and can answer any questions you may have relating to this position. Excuse me. So the next few slides relate to the information you received at the March 22nd GPC meeting relating to the presentation on the results of the business permit function review. So this review consisted of several recommendations, and they are listed in the next 3 slides. Oops, no, that is the right one. So each one has an impact on the budget, and therefore the committee is being asked to make to consider adding them to the final financial plan. So the first recommendation is for 2 new staff positions, and as these are operational costs ongoing, the funding source would be general taxation, and that's a 0.11% increase in 2021 and an approximate 0.09 in 2022. So this is for 1 additional building supervisor and 1 additional building official. And Mr. Lindsay and I believe Mr. Holm are here and can answer any questions you may have about these recommendations. So I'll go through all of them. So the next recommendation is for software to help support online applications, including a cost recovery option for credit card fees. So it is estimated that the implementation of a software solution would cost around $375,000. And funding could come from either the Special Initiatives Reserve or general taxation. As it is a one-time cost, you could fund it from the reserve. And it is anticipated that ongoing operating costs will be approximately $150,000 a year. And as this is ongoing operational costs, the funding would be general taxation. And it is anticipated that approximately $25,000 in consulting services will be needed to assist with the implementation of these recommendations. So items such as the ones listed here, so developing a terms of reference, developing eligibility criteria, and reviewing and updating internal process guides, all of those kind of things would the consultant would help onboard or help us get to where we need to be to implement all of these recommendations. So funding could come from either the Special Initiatives Reserve or general taxation. So a South End Recreation Center feasibility study. So the construction of a South End Recreation Center has been long discussed, and as such it was felt that funding for a feasibility study and a conceptual design should be undertaken, and this would inform future financial plan funding needs should council decide to undertake this project. As this is a one-time cost, the recommended funding source would be the Special Initiatives Reserve. And Mr. Harding is here and can provide much more details on this than I can, as he's been heavily involved with this process for many years. And this will also could tie into our discussion on the 19th at the Finance and Audit Committee meeting when we talk about capital projects. And this one you're probably more familiar with, as you had the presentation on Monday. And this is for additional funding for security in the downtown core that was identified for consideration at that meeting. So this is a copy of the slide that showed the budget implications that were presented at the meeting and outlining the potential costs for 2021 and 2022.
Councillor Armstrong, you were on for a question, then off. You're prepared to wait, I take it.
I was just wondering when we're supposed to ask our questions. I do have a question on the South End bill or study.
If there's a specific question, perhaps now if you want, but the anticipation was we would answer questions at the end of the.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine. Thank
I'll
you.
wait until the end.
Thank you. We don't get to see Richard's new shirt yet.
Pardon me, what's
We
that?
don't get to see Richard's new shirt yet.
Yeah. In the presentation, it was identified that adding $400,000 to the 2021 budget would help fund expanded security services in the downtown core. So the potential funding sources are the Special Initiatives Reserve and general taxation. So as you know, council made a motion to include additional security costs in the application for the Strengthening Community Services Program grant through UBCM that we're currently completing the application for. So Mr. Lindsay is here and can answer questions that you may have regarding this item. So the next few items are kind of housekeeping items. So at the March 15th council meeting, a council motion was made to add the Halliburton Sidewalk project to the 2022 budget and fund it from the Special Initiatives Reserve. So this project was already budgeted to be completed in 2025, and the funding source was from the Community Works Fund. And staff are recommending that a motion be made to change the funding source back to the Community Works Fund, as this fund has more funding restrictions than the Special Initiatives Reserve. So that will give council more room in the Special Initiatives Reserve for other projects and initiatives. So it's just where we fund it from. And the last item is, as outlined in the slide, council made a motion to earmark funding in the Special Initiatives Reserve for Health and Housing Task Force initiatives. Council also made a motion to fund these initiatives from general taxation. However, a motion to remove the earmarked reserve funding was never made. So staff are requesting that a motion be made to remove the earmark in the Special Initiatives Reserve so funding can be used for other projects and initiatives. So that's the end of all of the decision slides that we have. And so we've gone through them all, and I can jump back to the first slide and we can go through them one by one, and you can have discussion on how you would like to proceed with each one of those.
You might want to just, before you get into the big discussion, you might want to take a brief break, because I think this will take a while. This might be a good time to do that.
Wise counsel as always, Mr. Rudolph. Resume at 11, please, everyone. Thank you very much.
Let me go to the bathroom.
Hi, Leonard Krogh here. I'm here with Karen Lindsay today. She's going to show me how to sign up for our app.
Voyant Alert, the City of Nanaimo's emergency notification system. So we'll start by going into the App Store, Mayor Krogh.
Done?
Next, you're going to hit search, and you're going to search for the app, which is Voyant Alert. So it's VOYENT. Now you see, it's already selected it. Click there, hit get, and then we're going to install.
And why are we downloading this app?
We're downloading that so that you can get this onto your phone system, and what it will do is it will send you a push notification out. So if the City of Nanaimo issues an emergency alert, it will actually push the notification out onto your phone. The really nice part of this app is that it's anonymous, so it goes by postal code. So we're not requesting you to put your name or personal information in, it just works off of the app through your phone system. There are also, if you have family members or friends that maybe don't have a smartphone or would like another way, you can also sign up online or call our Public Works Department, and they have phone and texting options available as well. So there's lots of options for people depending on what their needs are.
Fabulous. So you can rest with some comfort knowing you can find out what's necessary and know that people who are important to you are notified.
Absolutely. So now you have Voyant Alert on your phone. And now just select open. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to tap in the postal code that it's prompting you.
All right. So
So you just click on there. and start entering. And then find on a map. So here you'll see the welcome page for the City of Nanaimo, and you want to subscribe to notifications, yes?
Yes.
Click that you agree to the terms, so click both to the yes for consent, and then hit next. And it's going to ask to either allow or not allow notifications, and you want to always allow.
Always allow.
Always allow. And the reason that is, if you don't allow, it won't push the notification out to you. So always allow.
Always allow.
And now you see here, you've got a message to accept that you've signed out. That's the two-factor authentication, and you're going to tap yes. And now you're in the system. Also, when you have a moment, we recommend that you pick your locations and sign up based on those locations, and then you'll get alerts from the City of Nanaimo.
Karen, thank you. Everyone, sign up.
Hey, Tiana. Hey. It sure is the coldest rink in town.
Oh, yeah, buddy! Nice save, James!
Wow, your goalie is keeping you guys in the game. Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, man, that's hot.
Sorry, that's the way I like it. Oh. Go, 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 go! Penalty shot!
Scalds from hot drinks are a leading cause of hospitalization for children under 5.
2 minutes, stand in the front, unsportsmanlike conduct.
Hot tea and coffee will cause serious burns to a child in less than a second.
Got a kid? Use the lid.
This is the 2018 redux of the lighting at Nanaimo's historic bastion. I've had the pleasure of being part of the relighting project on this amazing building in downtown Nanaimo. So what we did is we've replaced the original high-pressure sodium lights, which basically did an okay job of lighting up the bottom 10 feet of the building, and replaced them with modern LED lighting that has the capacity to change color. We can run through a number of different colors that we have pre-programmed here, in a pink, a purple, a green. Probably my favorite on here is Rainbow Chase for Pride Week. It'll actually run all the way around the building all the time.
With this new technology, organizations can now request that the bastion be lit to promote their cause by going to the City Nanaimo website and following the instructions. Go to Your Government, Bastion Lighting Requests, complete the lighting request form, and submit. You will hear from us within a couple days if your request has been approved, and the bastion will be lit in the colors that you have requested. If you have any questions, please contact the Mayor's office at 250-755-4400.
So the next time you're in downtown Nanaimo at night, come on and check out the new dynamic lighting at the Bastion.
We're here today to make a couple street names. There was some vandalism in town, and we're just going to make replacements. And the roads today we're doing are Dundas Street and Bruce Avenue. They're all 8-inch, and we use 3 different sizes, mostly 24-inch, 32-inch, and 36-inch. We do use a consistent font with street names. This is actually my metal blank, so the only material here is the material that I actually will cut out in vinyl. From here, we have to take out the vinyl that's not needed, which is the outer. So all we want to do is save the inside borders. From here, we actually have to put a transfer tape on it. And what this does is it allows us to take the blue vinyl and pull it away from the clear backing that it's on, so we can apply it to our aluminum blank. Now that we have our 2-sheeted piece of vinyl, we take our aluminum blank, which has high intensity diamond grade, which you can see behind me. We have all different colors. We have orange, yellow, white, depending on the type of signs. Most of our white signs are regulatory, and the yellow ones are warning signs. And right here, all I'm doing is...
All right, Ms. Mercer, if you're ready to resume, and we carry on then.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we will start back at the first item, which was the property tax freeze for business class 6. And as we're talking about property taxes, I'd just like to mention that we do have a report coming up in the agenda on property tax due date, extending that, changing the percentage breakup and extending the second penalty. So those are also tax relief measures to keep in mind when we get to that point. Ms. Legan will speak to that report when we get to there, but just thought I'd bring it up as we're kind of talking about tax relief for everyone. So is there any questions that the committee has on this topic?
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. Less of a question than, I guess, comments at this point. I thank staff for the report. I'm just not sure that I don't mind jumping out of the trench on this one first. In all due respect to Kim, and I appreciate him coming forward and asking this, and I still think that eventually we need to bring the commercial taxes and residential taxes closer. I just think that helping the businesses through this time of COVID by going through this won't necessarily work. And I'm quite of the opinion that I know a number of businesses are hurting this time, and that is painfully clear. But also a number of businesses are doing very well at this time. And I'm a business manager of one that's doing just fine. Actually, a business manager of 2 companies, and they're both doing fine during this period of time. So I'm not sure that this is the best way of providing the support that we need for the business that are hurting. I think there's probably better ways of doing it, not necessarily this one. That's my point. So,
thank you, Councillor Bonner. Councillor Thorpe.
Well, thanks, Your Worship. To this item, I note that Mr. Smythe's request when he came to council was I think, eminently reasonable, and that was simply to ask staff through council request to do an analysis of this proposal, not to necessarily right away endorse a freeze. So staff on council's direction went away and they did a very complete analysis, and I really appreciate the information and all of the options and the pros and cons that they've provided. And having read through that, I'm not prepared to support any of the scenarios or the options that we have in front of us. Partly, as Councillor Bonner just said, this is sort of a blanket solution that not all businesses require extra help at this time. Certainly some, especially in the hospitality industry, do, but we're trying to accommodate them in other ways. But this I don't think is something, this hardship doesn't apply to many businesses, and therefore they really don't, to be blunt, need this extra help. And secondly, just as important to me, any of these scenarios result in one or two things or both. One is shifting the tax burden more onto residential, which I don't support. And secondly, resulting down the road in probably in 1 year, if not 2 years, 2 years if not 1 year, an extra tax bump. Because anytime you restrict something in 1 year, you pay for it down the road. So for that reason, I appreciate the report. I'm not prepared to endorse any of the options that are presented. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm probably going to get lots of negative emails on my comment here, but I'm going to make it anyway. There's a couple reasons why I'm uncomfortable with this. One, Councillor Thorpe indicated, and I too concur, that there's a lot of businesses, including a local florist in town, that are doing quite fine, thank you very much. I know there's a lot that are challenged, but I also think back to 81, 82, when we had that significant downturn, and in my opinion, it was way more extensive than today's downturn with the pandemic. There weren't handouts coming from government, so you either sank or you swam, one of the two. And you know, those that survived came out of it as a much stronger business. Those that didn't kind of fell into the numbers where, I think a course I took a number of years ago, 80% of, after 5 years of new businesses, 80% fail, and then in the next 5 years, those that survived, a further 80% of those fail. Now, I don't know if that's accurate today, but certainly back in 81, 82 was. The other thing that I think we need to remember, there's one other issue with regard to the relationship between property taxes and income tax. Corporations, private entities, companies that are able to declare as expenses property taxes and payments in lieu of to landlords and as part of their rent as pre-income tax expenses. Residential people in the city, for the most part, do not. It's post-income tax. So there is a kind of an unfair balance, if you want to put it that way, in that scenario. And I think I would be quite happy to be able to support something that specifically helped out specific business niches, such as hospitality and some of the personal support type businesses that are challenged right now. And I know that's probably not what staff wants to hear, because it's going to be a lot more work, but something like that, whether it's something to do with a grant that they can apply for. However, having said that, I'm not totally convinced that the municipality really has the authority or the ability to do something like that. It should fall on the shoulders of senior governments. So anyway, that's my opinion. I would love to be able to support something to help a portion of the business community, but as a blanket statement, I'm challenged with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. Based on the comments of everybody, I agree. I can't support this and put it on to the hands of the homeowners. And as Councillor Bonner and Thorpe and Turley have said, there's many businesses are thriving through this. There's you know, the hospitality and travel industry are really hurting. However, there are grants and stuff now available from the provincial and federal government. So I think that's the right way to go. So I can't support a blanket tax rebate or whatever. Thanks.
Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with all of the points that have been raised, and I won't repeat them. I will just say I think this is a bit of a blunt tool for what I think we're all trying to do, which is to support the industries that are failing. And I think rather than grants, we can all just continue to buy local and continue to encourage folks to buy local and to continue to frequent the hospitality sector in Nanaimo, owned by local business owners. So appreciate Mr. Smythe bringing it forward. I appreciate the detailed report, but it's just a bit too blunt for me. Thank you.
I want to thank all the previous speakers for their intelligent commentary. And I'm going to climb on my favorite hobby horse, one of my favorite hobby horses, for just a minute, and that is around the issue of taxation and income tax versus every other tax that's levied. As Councillor Turley has sagely and wisely pointed out, this is a deduction against income tax. If we reduce it, it may make you more profitable and you'll maybe pay a little more income tax, but we won't see the benefit of that. If you're not profitable, certainly it's a bit of a bonus. If you're not making any money and we reduce your property tax, that's right to your, that's a reduction of the loss you're facing this year. But it is, as Councillor Hemmons used the language, a really blunt instrument and just not very effective. The only real value I would see in this, and I'm not inclined to support it, is that it's simply a signal to the business community. They'll be able to say, well, council's concerned about us and paying attention, and we certainly are. But in terms of providing any kind of real effective relief to those businesses that have been more impacted or severely impacted by COVID, this is not going to do the case. Again, as Councillor Thorpe has pointed out, I appreciate the work of staff. We passed this motion fairly quickly and said, gee, this sounds like a nice idea or a good idea. We want to have a look at it. And staff have reported back to us, I think, in the only way that they really could, providing various scenarios. But the reality is, this is a meaningless gesture for those that are making lots of money, and for those that are really suffering, it would be a minor benefit at the best, and it's just not going to target those businesses that really need our support. As Councillor Hemmons has pointed out, the hospitality industry in particular has been severely impacted. So I'm with Councillor Thorpe where we started on this debate. I'm not going to support any of these relief measures. There are other things that we could be doing with this money, I think, that would be more effective in promoting the economy generally, which would help all of us. Councillor Bonner.
Report from staff on the property freeze tax revenues for business class properties. And in there on page, actually it's not page number, it refers to the business class 6 ratio. We are above the average of the places that are on that list. And I think that is something, it's really nothing to do with today's topic, but that's something I think we should consider, is that we shouldn't be above that average. And I would like to see, and I know staff hasn't done any research on changing the mill rate slightly, but I would like to see going forward, I'll probably be working on a motion to bring at least our average down through changing of the mill rate in future budgets, so that we lower the ratio so that we're below the average, I think, or at least at the average. Thank you.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick comment. First of all, I agree with Councillor Bonner on his statement. With regard to, don't look so surprised, we do agree sometimes. With regard to corporate income tax, the one thing that, unless the rules have changed, when I used to, we went a few years where we lost money, but that loss was able to be carried forward and applied against profits in the subsequent years. So, you know, if we hope that things will turn around and these companies will be able to stay in business, and in future years we'll be able to pull some of those losses and recoup the income tax that they would normally pay on in a profitable year. Thank you.
Seeing no further speakers, I think we're on to the next item. Ms. Mercer, and thank you to staff for their work on this. The end of all our journeying shall be to return to the place from whence we began and to know it for the first time, eh? That's something from the 60s.
Okay, so our next item is the Records and Information Specialist position. So again, this is a legislative services position to assist them with the records management project that is currently underway.
Your Worship, if I could speak just briefly about staffing. Firstly, I'd like to indicate that our management team spent, in my calculation, over 5 hours on this slide deck, getting it to this. We had a large number of positions that were on the table, and there's quite a few pressure points in our organization right now. We've been modest in our asks. We've been aggressive on our asks, but also actually modest in what we really need. Ms. Legan is with fresh eyes on our organization, is repeatedly identifying this. This has been something that we're still in the catch-up mode organizationally. In this particular case, I'll cite the example that we cut last week out of this conversation, were positions in the parks area. There's a record level of use of our parks, and we're down on our labor capacity, and we're barely able to keep up. We can get by this year, but it's something that really, with the growth in the community and the changes, we really need positions like that. I think there was another position that's leaving my mind right now that was talked about is a key pressure. Oh, I think it was in the police department. And we're seeing this is a group that's been under tremendous pressure and it continues to be under tremendous pressure. We've removed that. It will reappear in the fall budget as proposals for next year's consideration. But in this case, this is an example where we underestimated the requirements to implement a major corporate IT system, and we're going to see several of these over the next couple of years. We need to backfill and resource those projects so that they actually get done, because the other work we're busy, and I think the clerk's department will admit and to her credit, Miss Gurry was not here last week when we actually made this decision, so she didn't know about this until she came back. But I think it's just one where if we're going to move in this project, we have to do this. And so I just wanted to make that mention. There's been a fair amount of work that went into this, and this is one of those types of positions that this is an unusual thing to actually come for positions in the middle of a cycle. Normally, and we need to adhere to a proper budget process, and that's where we want to respect that. But we've highlighted this one as something that this project is now stalled or not moving as fast as we'd like. And so that's why it's here today. And again, it could easily go into the fall.
Thank you very much. Ms. Gurry, you were up and then you're down again, or?
Thank you, Worship. Mr. Rudolph covered it off really well, and I just wanted to, thank you for your support, Mr. Rudolph, and any other questions I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Councillor Turley, and then Gesselbrock and Thorpe.
Thank you, Worship. This is probably addressed to Ms. Mercer. A few meetings ago, we were told that we had a surplus from the 2020 fiscal year. Is there any room left in that surplus to apply to these items, particularly number 2, 3, and probably 4, as opposed to raising taxes for 2021? Is there enough left from the surplus to cover some of this off?
Through your worship to Councillor Turley. With regards to the position, it is ongoing. It is an ongoing cost, so we wouldn't recommend that be funded from reserve, because if you did, you would have to either fund it from reserves forever, or if you decided to do it for 2 years or 3 years, eventually we have to pick that up in tax revenue. So anything that's ongoing operational, we wouldn't recommend, but certainly if it's a one-time cost or if it's a 2-year impact, we could fund it from reserves. But keep in mind, if it looks like a one-time thing and then it gets added permanently to the budget, at some point you're going to pay the piper for that, so to speak.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just move the recommendation.
Seconded, Councillor Marmon. Do you wish to speak to it?
I think it's a needed position, and looks like a lot of effort's been put in to present it here, and I think that we should just go for it. Thanks.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be supporting this as well. I said when we began our budget deliberations that I would look hard and fast at any motions related to increased staffing. And I have, and I've looked at each one individually. Some I've supported, some I have not. I take Mr. Rudolph's comments very seriously and sympathetically, and I understand what he's saying, and I agree with what he's saying. And I think this is a very worthwhile position that we need to fill, and I'll be supporting the next recommendation as well when it comes to that. Further, Your Worship, I'll say this now before we go any further. We're looking right now at a 2.8% tax increase, and I will go on record as saying that I think that is entirely reasonable. And people that want to challenge me on that are welcome to contact me and do so. I also really took to heart one of the first things that Ms. Mercer told us in our presentation this morning, and I made note of it, that we have used, quote, significant amount of reserves, end quote, in the past year, partly to offset the COVID situation. That's alarming to me, and it's not something that's sustainable. So this position and the next one come from general revenue. I will support them for a number of reasons. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Your Worship. I won't be supporting this. Yes, we are starting at 2.8, but we've started at numbers like that before, and then by the time we're done, we're significantly higher. I am in support of development service recommendations regarding staffing because we've had quite a comprehensive discussion on that in the report. This is the first time I've seen this. I would much more prefer to review this in the fall budget with the business cases that would come forward and the context of the other business cases forward. So I'm not prepared to support this right now. I may be in the fall, but I would need to see the context and the actual business case for that. I don't see that here today. For me, that's a different scenario with the building inspection department because I do think that business case was, or the case for that anyways, was spelled out by Mr. Nielsen and staff a couple weeks ago or a few weeks ago. So not prepared to support this just based on one slide deck and a lack of context.
Ms. Gurry, do you wish to comment, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I do believe a business case has been shared with Council to that effect, and for the defensive process, Mr. Rudolph alluded to this as well. Normally, staff would not be coming forward at this time in the budget process, asking for or seeking for positions. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to at least ask for this. I did allude to it in my business plan presentation in the fall, that I would have been coming forward with an ask at that time had it not been for COVID. And I believe Councillor Hemmons at the time said, why wasn't I? And I said I would for sure in the next budget cycle for certain be asking. Because of COVID and because of the restraints that were unknown and the uncertainty of budget, et cetera, at the time in the fall, it didn't come forward at that time. And staff have worked really hard in the last year, and bless them. They have been really willing to work as we try to restructure and reorganize the department, doing different scenarios and adjusting workload and balancing, and it's just not been successful. And workplace resiliency, sustainability, et cetera, I'm quite concerned about, so that is why, and I thank Mr. Rudolph again for his support, that's why this is before you now at this part in the process. So my apologies, it's not a normal circumstance, but that is why it's here today.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. A couple of questions I may, as right now in our budget process, 0.4% represents about $40,000 roughly. So it's $40,000 this year, $40,000 next year, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's about 48 for 2021 and 49 for next year.
So that's actually represents a sort of like a 0.08% increase if we were to do it in January 1st, which we can't because we're past that. I'm wondering if we could go back to our the special initiatives we reserve funding to reduce taxes to 3% money. and possibly cover those two just for the next 2 years and look at it, added it into our third year, which would be 2023. Is that an option? Knowing full well, I understand the concept,
Yeah.
operations, that sort of stuff.
I mean, it is an option, but, you know, as I've warned, that you will increase in year 2023, which is already at 3.5. Given the fact that we don't know what growth and all those other estimates are going to come in at, as of right now, it's 3.5, so you would be lifting that at this point.
If we have the
But
same.
it is an option.
Yeah, if we have the same people on staff as we do now, I'm sure you'll have that whittled down considerably by the time we get there. I would certainly like to look at that part of it, because I do really want to keep our taxes below, because we're looking at a much higher tax increase on the next item. So that'll, in theory, bump us above 3 if we do with both of these.
I'm going to follow the recommendations of staff on this one. I think that it's placed a strain on a whole bunch of people at a time that they don't need strain, and this needs to be done. So seeing no further speakers, the motion's been moved. All those in favor and contrary, Councillor Brown and Councillor Armstrong, you were in favor, yes?
In favor.
Thank you. Yes, motion carries.
Your Worship?
Councillor Bonner.
I'm going to give it a shot. That motion that the tax revenue of 0.04% for 21 and 2022 be taken from the special initiative reserve funding to reduce taxes to 3%. I'll look for seconder.
Councillor Turley. You have a seconder. Do you wish to speak to it?
Only in that I'm just cognizant of where we're going, and really want our taxes to be down below 3%. So if this one doesn't pass, I'll be coming at it another different direction on the next one. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just going to call the question, but we're already robbing Peter to pay Paul a few places in this budget. We could go down this path forever. So I just, on this and others, I would hope that we do not do this.
For what it's worth, I won't be supporting Councillor Bonner's motion either. Do I see any further speakers? None. All those in favor? Councillors Bonner and Turley. All those opposed?
I can see.
That's everybody else on council. Motion is defeated. Back to you, Ms. Mercer.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the next, we'll go through one by one of the recommendations out of the building permit function review. So the first one is for the addition of 2 staff positions. Again, that was a building supervisor and a building official. And there would, as they're ongoing, it's general revenue funding, and that's a 0.11 increase for 2021 and approximately a 0.09 for 2022.
Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Your Worship. I would like to move the option that's included in the slide there.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmons. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Brown?
I think we've covered it, and we've all seen the Nielsen presentation and the presentation from staff.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is connected with the motion, but it's probably considered a separate item, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway. When Mr. Nielsen made the presentation, he indicated, I seem to recall anyway, that there may be appetite from the development community if for value as opposed to dollar amount. In other words, what I'm saying is if the speed at which projects can move forward is improved, the speed to which they might be amenable to paying more money for it, which would offset the concern over general tax revenue for added people. I don't know if that has had any, and when that's going to be discussed, or whether there's any appetite for that. Perhaps through the staff might be able to clarify something for me. Thank you.
Mr. Holm, do you wish to comment briefly?
Thank you. Yes, Your Worship, through Councillor Turley's question. We are, that's correct, that Mr. Nielsen's recommendations also included a review of building permitting fees as well. He'd identified it wasn't a thorough review of comparable fees in his report. It was sort of outside the scope, but he identified that increased building permit fees is a likely source of covering some of the costs going forward. As well, there's a recommendation, there's a report further on the agenda that includes a grant application. If we're successful in the grant application for development approval improvements, the work that we undertake as part of the grant funding initiative would be in part to review building permit fees as well and look at increasing fees. And as Mr. Nielsen had commented through his interactions with building industry stakeholders, yeah, there is an appetite to pay additional fees if we can improve efficiencies. And I think we'll be looking at that carefully. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think Councillor Turley and myself are like two peas in the pods today. I agree with 100%. And in my conversation with all of the people who are in the building industry, they all said they don't mind paying extra fees as long as the service improves. So I understand it's kind of early in that process, but I would like to see somehow that this money be paid for as a fee for service instead of out of general revenue.
Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you, Your Worship. Happy to support the motion. We went through the process and the trouble to identify the gaps, and so it makes no sense to me that we wouldn't fund what we identified. I am curious, though, for 3, 4, and 5, it's a suite of recommendations all to do with development services, but we don't have a total in terms of the tax increase if we implement all 3, because there is some ambiguity about where 4 and 5 would potentially be funded from. So I'm just putting that on the table that as council discussion evolves on 4 and 5, having a figure that we can kind of contemplate in terms of implementing everything together, that would be great. Thank you.
Ms. Mercer, if you could comment.
Yeah, through Your Worship to Councillor Hemmens. So these are just rough numbers, but for 2021, for all 3, if you include all 3 recommendations, the tax impact is just 0.11 of the approximately, and for 2022, it's 0.09 for the for staffing, and then the software ongoing licensing costs is 0.13. So that's what 0.21. Just 1 second. What, speaking?
Through the chair to Councillor Hemmens. So with the position you approved for ledge services, assuming you approved both positions for development services and funded them from taxes, assume you support the software with the initial cost coming from the Special Initiatives Reserve, and then the ongoing licensing would be from property taxes, and assuming you approve the $25,000 for the consulting to move forward the implementation, and you fund that from the Special Initiatives Reserve, because you have choices, you can do property taxes, but assume you use Special Initiatives of Reserve where appropriate for one-time costs, you'd be looking at approximately, because we're doing this on the fly, 3% in 2021, 3.6 in 2022, and we'd still be at 3.5 in 2023. So you'd be impacting year 1 and year 2. And at that point, we would not be taking anything from that 400,000 from the Special Initiatives Reserve, because only if you go above 3% would we draw on that 400,000, because that was the motion that you made at provisional.
Thank you, Ms. Fuller. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I'm in support of all the positions. I don't agree with taking general taxation both for development service implementation or for the software. I think those need to come from the special reserve fund. But the staff positions definitely from operations, so taxation. Thank you.
No further speakers. All those in favor? Any contrary? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you. Ms. Mercer?
Okay. So the next item relates to software. And this again is $375,000 for the software implementation and $150,000 for annual operating costs. So the operating costs funded from taxation, but you have options from the Special Initiatives Reserve or general taxation for the implementation.
Councillor Martman.
I'd like to move the recommendation.
Seconded Councillor Hemmens. Do you wish to speak to it?
I think that all of us, all three of these are related to the same item. We had an extensive presentation and review. We know this is definitely necessary for our city in our economic development and its improvement. So definitely I support this one and the next one. So.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further speakers, all those in favor? Any contrary? Seeing none, motion carries. Ms. Mercer?
Okay, and the last item was the $25,000 for consulting services to help with the implementation of the recommendations. And then again, you have two funding sources, the Special Initiatives Reserve or General Revenue. But it is one time, so Special Initiatives Reserve is more than appropriate to do that.
Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'll move this first, and then I have a question. I'll move the motion from the Special Initiatives Reserve.
Okay, seconded Councillor Hemmens. Councillor Brown?
Thanks. My question is actually on the last motion. I just wanted to, I don't know if, there wasn't clarity for me just to make sure that the 375 was coming from the Special Initiatives Reserve. Okay, thank you. That's all?
That's all.
Okay.
Any further discussion or questions on this? All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Thank you. Ms. Mercer?
Okay, so the South End Recreation Center feasibility study, again, this was $200,000 for this study and conceptual design and a Class D budget of options for probable costs. So again, one time kind of initiative or project, and so the funding source could be the Special Initiatives Reserve.
Councillor Armstrong?
Yeah, I always have a concern about this, that we're going out for the feasibility studies and design studies, conceptual design. Why aren't we just using what's worked like Oliver Woods? That would save us a lot of money. We've already got the design in place. It seems to be working. Or if we know it's not working, you can just amend it. I've been concerned about spending $200,000 on, first of all, feasibility study, if you believe, because we already know that it's needed. And secondly, I don't think we should be always changing conceptual designs. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harding, do you want to comment, please?
Armstrong. So with this, it would be much more than just the feasibility. Part of this is looking at, first of all, if you can find a location and how we can work on the location with it. Also, with working with the South End group and the whole South End community is, what are some of those other services that may need to be provided in this area that are different than, say, Oliver Woods? There's a number of other community type of services, be it childcare or library services or health services that we could look at combining and working with, maybe also working with the school board, some of the other service providers or groups in the area like Boys and Girls Club and others. So even though it looks like a lot, it's really providing that money to do a number of exploratory work on providing, coming back to council and the community on a number of options, what this facility could look like and be, and where.
And just for clarification, refer to South End, are you referring to States River area in Cinnabar?
Yeah, so when I say South End, I would say anything south of 10th Street.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Would someone care to move the motion? Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Martman. Councillor Thorpe, do you want to speak to it?
Well, very briefly, thank you, Your Worship. I'm happy to move this. I'd like to see us take at least this first step of a feasibility study and stakeholder engagement. This is a potential project that I think I can say safely, Council has heard about a lot from our constituents, and it's something that's needed in the South End sooner than later. So I'd like to see us, again, take the first step. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm struggling with this one because there's no staff report, and I think there's no staff report, and with the ongoing planning exercise and some other items up in the air, I would like to see that all in one place. Not that I don't think we should start to do some planning on this, but I just note if it's coming from the Special Initiatives Reserve, there's no urgency to approve it here today. And so I think something of this scope deserves more than just some points on a slide. The decision to go down this path, I think responsibly needs a staff report. So I don't doubt the need for it, absolutely. I think this is going down a path without the context that I would make me more comfortable for that type of decision, and that there is essentially no urgency due to the funding source.
Mr. Harding.
Your Worship, Councillor Brown, if this was approved and Council showed that initiative this is something you want us to work on, we'd come back with a more detailed report on the overall process and structure, how we would do this. In anticipation that this work would go into, following year, looking towards, possibly a referendum or some other funding review, 2022, 2023, those types of opportunities. So this would just give us indication as staff, you want us to proceed with this this initiative that is quite out. As Ms. Mercer mentioned nicely, that I've been working on this for she just didn't say many years, but I think she meant to say many years. So this was one of the objectives in the 2005 Parks, Recreation, and Culture Master Plans, one of the main initiatives that we didn't proceed with through that time. So the community's been very patient of us going forward to at least get to the next stage of what could this facility be. And I would say that at the end of the day, it wouldn't be recreation. It would probably be more of a community wellness, community recreation wellness type of center. That's probably more into the weeds that you're mentioning. But again, if Council shows us as an initiative, we'd come back with a more detailed report, phased out how we're going to proceed with this project.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm also struggling with this one, but for different reasons. I was thinking more about the comments of our CAO saying that we have exponential increase in people using our parks since COVID and really not having the ability necessarily to keep up, or we're kind of just keeping there. And there's no doubt that there's a necessity for us to explore this, but I tend towards having a philosophy of doing what we do already, making sure that we do it really, really well before we take on new projects. And I'm not saying that we're not doing parks really, really well, but I am seeing a lot of pressure in the budget around folks using our parks in a different way. And so I'm open to being convinced, but at this point, I won't support this. And I'm also curious about Councillor Brown's rationale. The fact that this would be funded from the Special Initiatives Reserve means that there isn't the pressure on this that I would have that could be there otherwise. So, open to being convinced.
Thank you. I will happily support this motion for a number of reasons. The old line about the longest journey begins with the first step, and this is not even the first step in some respects, because as Mr. Harding has pointed out, this has been on the plan, so to speak, or the concept for many years. The good people in the south part of our city who have come to us fairly regularly complaining about the traffic at Chase River and the difficulties there, just by their concerns emphasize how much of the population lives there, how much growth there has been. One doesn't have to drive very far or very long to see those demands. I'm appreciative that Councillor Armstrong has from time to time pointed out that many in the North End feel that they are denied facilities and that they're all in the South End already, but of course most of those facilities they're talking about are really, if you look at the map, geographically speaking, in the centre of this city. When you actually look at the south part of our community, and considering all the interest in development there, getting ahead of the curve, so to speak, in a very tiny way with respect. I'm not diminishing the importance of $200,000. It's still real money at my house. But having said that, I think this is an important step. It is also a signal to the people of the South End that we take their concerns that they have raised regularly with us seriously, that we believe that everyone deserves access to recreation. I appreciate Councillor Hammond's comments about our parks. The level of use may change as COVID diminishes, who knows? But certainly over the longer haul, I don't want to be having this discussion next year and deciding on something and thinking, gee, we're going to get to the study now when we should have had the information already, which will help guide us. And also potentially guide us around any referendum questions that we may wish to put before voters at the time of the next election or before. So I think this is potentially $200,000 worth of very important information that will guide this council. And so I'm going to support it. Councillors Bonner and Brown in order.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question, Mr. Harding, if I may. If we were to, not that we can't, but just duplicate what we have out at Oliver Woods and plunk it down in the South End, what sort of extra cost, once it's up and running, would the city expect to incur, knowing over the last year we've figured out, or at least I've figured out how much our recreation facilities are heavily subsidized. What sort of subsidy or what extra cost is that going to incur?
Your Worship, Councillor Brown, my apologies, I was Councillor Bonner, I don't have that cost right in front of us now. The difference with Oliver Woods, of course, would be we had land specifically for Oliver Woods. The construction cost of Oliver Woods was quite a few years ago now. So all those issues would be different. I think one of the opportunities on the feasibility was looking at partnerships. And so what can we do with the school board? What can we do with Boys and Girls Club and other agencies, which I think would be a good opportunity differently here as a true community center. So I think it's going to be, it won't just be apples and oranges or apples and apples with the Oliver Woods, because I think there's definitely some things at Oliver Woods that work extremely well, and we could have 2 or 3 of those going on a non-pandemic year, and there'd be demand for it. But I also think in this community there's some other services that we may want to consider that would be included that's not in Oliver Woods right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Your Worship, and thanks for the response, Mr. Harding. I'm going to support this, but I'm just wondering, it is a significant thing. It is a significant thing for the community. It's a significant path to go down, and do we need a separate motion to get a report back before this kicks off and the work gets done? Because I just think there is some important context, and I'm happy to support that and indicate that movement, but you know, if someone called me up today and said, hey, what did you spend $200,000 on, and I can't really outline it to them, I think that's not exactly great stewardship. And so I'm just curious about process-wise, when you say there would be a report, is that coming, or is it before the work, or is it like, okay, hey, we've started the work and here's for your information?
Councillor Brown, the worship through Councillor Brown, absolutely our intention would be, because we need to frame this out ourselves too, in detail of what it would do. So any planning process that we do initiate, we always get approval from council prior. So we'd definitely do this with this. If council supported this, we'd come back with a phased type structured approach to this process.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thanks, Your Worship. Not to prolong this, but I just have to, I guess, repeat that I'm strongly supportive of this feasibility study going ahead. Our city is growing quickly, and where our population is booming especially and about to explode is in the South End, and we already have residents asking, if not demanding politely, for increased facilities. And I think that's one of the city's duties to provide, as well as things like garbage and water and public safety, its recreational facilities and opportunities. So I think we need to jump on this now and get a feasibility study. I don't see the need for any preliminary report to take that first step at least. There's lots of decision points that will be further down the road, and we'll face those when they come, but let's get this started at least. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further speakers.
No, I want to speak.
Sorry, pardon me, Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I think it's very important to get this feasibility study done. Now we've seen grants coming up and infrastructure grants popping up really fast with very short time deadlines. So I think it's really important that we get this done, and we may even be in an opportunity to take advantage of some of them. And I do think, as Councillor Thorpe said, you know, the South End has been waiting for this for a very, very long time, and it's really important to start on this work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we can proceed to the vote. Councillor Hemmons.
I'll just say that Councillor Armstrong convinced me. I do appreciate the idea of having a shovel-ready project for all of the money that's flowing from the province right now.
We've had a magnificent collection of combinations this morning at this council table. I'm delighted to see it. It's that cross-pollinization that makes for better growth and development. All those in favor? Any contrary? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you very much. And Ms. Mercer.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the next item is the downtown security. So we can, what we're looking at for 2021 is possibly adding an additional $400,000 to the budget to expand security in the downtown core. And your potential funding sources are Special Initiatives Reserve or General Revenue. It could be a one-time cost, depending on what decisions are made for 2022. So that's why you have a bit of an option there.
Thank you, Councillor Martman.
Thank you. I'd like to move the Finance and Audit recommend that Council add $400,000 to the 2021 financial plan for expanded downtown security and to come from the Special Initiatives Reserve. And I'll speak to it.
And seconded, Councillor Thorpe. And go ahead, Councillor Martman.
And we all heard the presentation. We know about safety and security all over our city, but especially downtown. The reason I say from the Special Initiatives Reserve is because I think we're dealing with extraordinary circumstances right now with the pandemic, and that the city, we are submitting a grant application to the Strengthening Community Services. So I'm really optimistic that this $400,000 expenditure will be returned to the city when we are successful in our grant application. The question I do have through the chair is, if we were successful in the grant, does that get to be put back into the Special Initiatives Reserve?
Through your worship, to Councillor Martman, yes. The funding would just not, we wouldn't use that funding in the reserve, so it would stay there to fund other projects or initiatives.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I mentioned this at the meeting on Monday. I'm concerned about just putting out additional $400,000 here, $400,000 there. I think we should be hiring 3 more bylaw officers that can deal with these issues. Our city is growing. We're going to need them anyhow. And then it also gives us the ability to move them, because if you clean up the downtown, they're just going to be dispersed to, like we've seen in the past, over to Terminal Park area or back down south area. I think it's really important that we start looking at this from a bigger picture instead of like 1 year it's 100,000, next it's 400,000. I believe a previous year it was 500,000. We would just fund our staffing properly. That would make a big difference. So I'm really struggling with this because I really think that we should be looking at increasing our bylaw services to deal with this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. Mr. Rudolph.
Your Worship, I wanted to follow up on that comment. I was going to make this comment anyway because, you know, it's become a pressing concern, I think, in the dialogue of people in the community. And one of the things on the slide that we saw just previous was the notion of preparing a security plan for the downtown. And it's something that could be a business case prepared and put into next year's budget. This is something that, this is what we're doing now is simply allocating funds in a way that's not really sustainable. And we saw an outcome of that. If it's next year, it could be $1 million. For security or some additional costs. That's not what's being proposed. That was just a hypothesis if we continued down this path. So the idea was, and to speak to Councillor Armstrong's comment about what kind of resources should we be deploying in the downtown and other parts of the community to address this issue of public safety. So the idea of a downtown security plan, I would call it a public safety action plan. And this is something that we could advance before and maybe inform our budget cycle for this. instead of deferring that piece, maybe council should be directing us to prepare a framework for a strategy that gets done over the next several months immediately. Even the idea of a task force would probably take too long. I think we could get some capacity to rationalize our resources, be they police, bylaws, private security, and come back with an action plan that will inform our future budget cycles, because this motion on the table is just simply getting us through this year. And this goes back to the original suggestion by some members of the business community that we needed to have a holistic approach for not only the BIAs, but the areas around there. So I'm not sure if you'd be prepared to allocate $50,000 today for this to get going on this action plan, or to ask us to come back with a report that identifies a process to deal with this. But I think one of the things we're struggling with is how we are allocating our resources, and where are the gaps. And so the idea is, I think, right. It's just how fast do you want to do this security or public safety action plan is what I'm calling it. So I'm asking you if you're interested in advancing that concept, and how would you propose to us to make it so that you're comfortable with understanding what we're trying to do.
Thank you, Mr. Rudolph. Councillor Hemmons?
Thank you. That gave me a lot to think about. If we are successful with our Strengthening Communities grant, will we get the full allocation of the $400,000 back? I can't remember how much we applied for.
Yes, so if I get this wrong, Ms. Fuller will correct me, but we put many asks, or we are putting many asks in that application, and they could choose all of them or just some of them. So, and I believe the 400,000 was the full amount in there?
Yeah, the 400,000 is the full amount, but you have to remember that ask is
Over
for
2
a
years.
one-year period, so that runs through to June 30th, so only 200,000 of that ask applies to 2021. So potentially, if that full 400,000 was approved, 200,000 of that would be used for 2021. So that means if you approved this motion, then only 200,000 would come out of the Special Initiatives Reserve if the grant application was successful.
Okay, thank you for that. And I'm just going to provide some comments. I'm interested in the downtown, whatever you want to call it, security plan. And part of the reason I'm interested in that, and part of I'm struggling a bit with the timing of this, because we have a report coming on Monday, and I have no idea of the content of that report, but the model that we asked staff to look at, the single biggest draw on the budget to run that model was security. And so I'm curious about, just the timing of this. Do we approve $400,000 for downtown security now, and then we have a report on Monday whereby we're possibly looking at a model that requires, resources such as this, but are directed in a slightly different way? So, yeah, that's just my commentary. I'm curious for other thoughts. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner?
Thank you, Worship. I know we've been down this road out of a hundred times. I honestly don't think this is money well spent. I understand the need for it. I will support it. But in my little, I did a little bit of chatting with some business folks downtown, and clearly the number one thing they want is not in decreasing their taxes or even security. They want less homeless people in the downtown area. And the only way we can do this is, to me, is to match whatever funding we put into security into building 24/7 small shelter areas, so that people will have a place to go and can stay there. And if they can stay there and doing the similar model to what we're doing in Duncan, they typically, people who are homeless typically will stay in the shelter for the majority of the day, and then they will, because they're fed there and they're provided security during the night. And I think that's what we should be spending our security money on, is protecting the people who are on the street. And I don't think, no matter how much money we throw at security, unless we want to bring in the army, we're not going to solve this problem in our downtown area. So the only way we can do that is to provide some sort of shelter so people aren't camping in our downtown area. So I'm fine with this because I know it's a necessity now. And people are going to talk about lanes and everything else, and I'm going to argue whatever this council decides is our lane. So I believe that we should possibly be, because of the situation we're in now, in the lane of building shelters and providing services for our town temporarily until such time as province comes up and builds proper housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bonner. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I guess I'm not really clear now exactly where we're at on this topic. I know there is a motion on the floor, but we are also talking about, to some extent, a longer-term strategy. And I appreciate Mr. Rudolph's comments, and I would absolutely support in the longer term some type of task force or plan related to downtown security. I think we need to go there, and I would support that in the 2022 budget to take a bigger overview of the problem and longer-term solutions. I don't totally agree with Councillor Bonner's belief that building shelters is going to get rid of the homeless population downtown, and I'm going to stop referring to it as a homeless population. It's street people, and some of those street people would happily maybe move into mini houses, but some won't, and the problem will still exist. So whatever we do in the longer term, I think we owe it to our business community and our tax-paying citizens, I know I've said this before, to do something right now to try and give them some relief, to send them a signal that yes, we feel their pain, and even if this is a stopgap measure, I will support the motion that's on the floor wholeheartedly. I would also hope that we can have a discussion about longer-term solutions and put that in a future budget and look at a task force or something to really delve into this problem and how we can support our downtown businesses and residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to summarize, we do have the motion on the floor for the $400,000. It's been seconded. Mr. Rudolph has sagely suggested we consider a further $50,000 to develop quickly an action plan that may see us use the $400,000 that we budget more successfully or appropriately. Is that a fair summary, Mr. Rudolph?
So this is strictly the motion on the table. There also was the slide deck or the slide that was previous to this in your presentation and was addressed and reviewed on Monday with you. It was just bringing that forward as if it's an action item for the fall, in order to inform our business cases and our business plans, we're going to have to do a little more homework now to get to a place where we know if it should be 2 more bylaw officers, or it should be more RCMP, or it should be more security. So all I was saying is that plan could go next year, or it could go, it's just a matter of timing. So we will be coming forward, if it's not the time now for that, for a proposal to do this and a process at a later date. But at this time, and you can then expect we will have similar asks for security into next year that we're having this year in this. So there will be a replication of that unless a lot of housing miraculously or shelters emerge. And we're certainly, there's going to be a lot of conversation, and the housing task force and all this is very good stuff, but it takes time. And right now we have this immediate year and next year and maybe even beyond that, where we really need to be addressing what we see on the ground at this time to give the confidence that the downtown is a comfortable environment for everybody to come to and the businesses to flourish in. So it was really a timing issue there on that $50,000.
Ms. Curry?
Thank you, Worship. So Mr. Rudolph, I think, covered it. So currently, the motion on the floor is to fund security by the amount of $400,000 for the remainder of this year. A subsequent motion, Mr. Rudolph is suggesting, is for a $50,000 ask to do a public safety action plan that will inform the budget cycle in the fall for next year. So that could be something council considers subsequent to this motion, so separately.
Thank you. In order, Councillors Brown, Gesselbrock, and Turley.
Thanks, Your Worship. So I believe we spent $600K from the Special Initiatives Reserve. This would be $1 million plus if we add the study. With respect to unsheltered human beings in the downtown, brothers, sisters, mothers, sons, daughters, fathers, I think it's important we always put that in context. Undoubtedly have impact on the folks that live and have businesses downtown and elsewhere through the community. But I'm not prepared to support the $400,000 because I think there's an upcoming report that I'm very interested in, and Councillor Hemmons highlighted that, and there may be funding needs there, and security would be a big part of that. The outcome of the grant, I think we should do a public safety plan that looks at, has the police input, has the bylaw input, and if we could turn around, I completely agree with Mr. Rudolph, no task force, just get it done, hire someone that's an expert, do the analysis. To me, that would be the responsible way to allocate funding and talk about these funding. And I also think summer's coming up with vaccinations. People are hungry to get outside. That's going to reprogram that space, at least during the day. So I think all that starts to coalesce around the same time, the outcome of each of those processes. And as it's from the Special Initiative Reserve, motion on the floor, that decision, in my mind, could be made at a later date and be better informed by some additional processes. So I will not support this at this time.
Councillor Kesselbrock.
Thank you, Worship. I think that we're kind of building the plane as we go here, and I think sometimes it may appear that things are a bit piecemeal, how they, when they appear sort of in these discussions. This one in particular, I think emerging from this is like a definite recognition that our community is facing a situation where we have individuals with mental health, addictions, issues, and there's no proper support for them, and they are in our community without the proper resources, and that has huge impacts not only on their health when there's not proper shelter available or the resources, and also it's quite frightening for people when somebody's having a psychotic episode downtown when they're walking to their car by themselves at night, and I can definitely understand the need for having an additional presence downtown. And this issue is not going to go away, and that we need to both provide a safe, a certain degree of safety for individuals that are in the downtown area, and at the same time make sure that we're doing everything that we can as a community to provide the resources necessary to help these individuals that are suffering in our downtown core and elsewhere in the community. We do have the Health and Housing Task Force that is put together, a solid plan. We're going to receive a staff report on scattered site housing, if I'm not correct on that. Monday. And those probably will require additional considerations for a safety plan as well in the vacuum of the requisite provincial action to deal with this crisis. So I'm supportive of this allocation of funding. I think that it is not the most integrated and ideal plan going forward, but I am sure that staff and council is well aware that we need to have a more integrated safety plan for our downtown and our community that is also integrated in a response to dealing with what we can with the crisis that we're facing with mental health and addiction that brings with it many issues. So yeah, I support this funding allocation and will be here and pushing for further discussion on how we can better integrate our response in terms of health services, bylaw, police, everything. Thank you.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. I support the motion for three reasons. Number one, It's all about optics. The optics of not doing anything are definitely not positive. The optics of applying some funding to try to solve a problem, whether it actually does or not, are significant with regard to businesses and people wanting to actually go downtown. The second optic that I think is important to remember is that we're also sending a message to the province that, we know we have a significant problem and we're willing to throw some money on the table with it. Where the hell are you? And the third one is from a recent friend that I've been talking to who spent 20 years working on the downtown east side. Not every street person wants housing, period. And she was quite adamant and very vocal about that. So I have to take her at her word with the experience she's had. I know Councillor Bonner believes that a portion of them, hopefully it's only a portion of them, ideally all of them, but I don't think that's the case. So thank you.
Councillor Hemmens.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm hoping for some staff commentary on the order of what we're doing. We're looking at spending $400,000 on downtown security and then also maybe doing a downtown security plan. And I'm wondering about if you could just provide comment on that.
Yes, thank you. Through to Councillor Hemmens, Mr. Lindsay could speak to the 400. Yeah,
that guy.
Where is he? Speak to what this 400,000 is for.
Yeah.
And then the separate issue is moving forward into next year. That's we've heard various sets of information and there's opinions about how we should resource it. But I just want to I suggest that we get to a place where we are informed about how we choose to allocate these funds heading into the next budget cycle, and maybe even sooner. So right now, this is a placeholder to essentially carry on with what we're doing now with security. I may be slightly off on that, but it's roughly accurate. Mr. Lindsay could explain the 400,000, the purpose of it right now.
Mr. Lindsay.
Your Worship, I think the only thing I would add is, I think Council's aware, you've committed money through the Old City Quarter through what's been called the Community Connect program. That expires at the end of June. So that program will stop at that point. So the thought behind putting this money forward and initially in the grant application is two things, is allow security in some form to carry on in that area. The city has, and I think we covered this on Monday, but the city basically at this time has private security in downtown, and the original intent was that they would cover all of those areas. But because of demand, spend 95% of their time in our downtown parkades right now. So the idea is that by, and this is I agree, a short-term interim measure to get us through this year, and augment that private security so that they can move beyond just the parkades and cover off areas, larger scope, including the Old City Quarter, which, as mentioned, will not have that security function come the end of June. So augmenting our private security is the goal. And the other, if we went back to that last slide, and I think I mentioned this on Monday, that $1 million is put in there, but the intent would be to come forward with a business case to council about what is the best way to spend that money. And some of you have raised it this morning. Is it bylaw officers? Is it police? Is it augmented private security? And I agree with Mr. Rudolph is saying that if we had that security plan done this year in advance, it would help inform that business case and give us some guidance about, when we come back to you with your 2022 budget on the best way to allocate resources.
Okay, so my understanding then is that this 400,000 would bolster what we have going and also fill in the gap of what we're going to lose in June. And then the idea is hopefully that we bring in a consultant to help us look at this as a whole problem and as look at it from who's the best resource to take it on, what are the best resources like bylaws, et cetera. Okay, so just a question then about that $50,000 study. I'm seeing it in the 2022 budget, but that seems like that's something that we should get moving on now. So can I just I'm seeing nodding heads, but yes, that's something staff would like to move on now in order to inform future expenditures to ensure that they're actually
targeted. Council, we presented this as a slide deck on Monday, and the idea was these are ideas coming forward for next year's budget cycle. The question is, the proposition from my perspective is it might be money well spent to get a strategy now so that it informs our budget cycle heading into the fall, because as these other costs continue, or the pressure to us to allocate funds for security or other measures like that, it would be better to be informed on this. And secondly, we do need to align this with other initiatives. I know this is not, this is not a housing homelessness conversation, but there's an alignment with it. And we have to be mindful of that. But this is really just dealing with the pressures that exist in the downtown and trying to find an effective and appropriate way to manage that. So the suggestion is, based on Monday's conversation, is would you be prepared to accelerate that recommendation to, instead of considering it as a budget ask for the fall, to put it in now?
Councillor Martman.
Thank you. I think sometimes you have to put a Band-Aid on before you get to the surgery, unfortunately. And I think this is a Band-Aid solution, but I think we have to do something. The other day, because I live downtown or shop downtown all the time, and I was actually startled. I screamed because he came up behind me so suddenly in the Thrifty's parking lot, but I think I frightened him more than I frightened myself. And I talked to him. I mean, he actually took food, but he didn't want housing. I wish it was as simple as housing. He said, no, I'm not interested in housing. Obviously, he had some type of brain capacity. And that isn't the solution for the people that are on our streets right now. I think it's the solution for part of the population, but the other solution, and we've been screaming it loud at the provincial government, is we need therapeutic communities, or we need places for these people to go where they can be cared for, where society can actually look after them. And housing alone isn't going to do it. So I think we have to do something for our city and our downtown in the meantime for people that are shopping there, that people that do live there. And this security will go some ways in the optics of making us feel safer, even if we're technically not. I believe the majority, 99% of these people, are absolutely safe, wonderful people that need to be looked after. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Oh, thanks, Your Worship. We're really beating this one up, but it's an important topic. And I'll start by saying, if there is a subsequent motion for $50,000 for a public safety action plan, I'll happily support that. But right now, I guess we're still dealing with the motion on the floor, $400,000 adding security to the downtown area. And I think it's important to recognize that this is not a motion related to in any way attempting to solve the problem of homelessness or street people or whatever you choose to call them. We're working on that in a variety of ways, and we're looking at how we can supply housing and other supports, and that's great. But this motion is to provide support for the people that pay the bill for all that. And those are the taxpayers of our city, the citizens that want to be able to go downtown and feel safe supporting our local businesses. And it's to support the local businesses that are trying to survive downtown, in some cases under very difficult circumstances. So that's the intent of this motion that we're talking about, and I absolutely support it as a short-term measure to provide some support for those taxpayers and businesses that are trying to enjoy our city and survive and thrive in our city. And again, as I recognize, we're doing other things to work on the homelessness issue and what supports we can offer there. And I also support a longer-term view of public safety. And I will comment that I also totally agree with Councillor Armstrong's mention of bylaw being expanded as part of that. So to this motion, again, I support it, and I'll support any subsequent one. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. If someone said this money was to make people feel safe in the downtown, by providing security, I would vote against it because no one has actually proven to me that you can make our downtown safe for people to come down just by having security guards walking around. So I'm fine with the motion. My question is regarding the next part, and I know we're mixing these things up, and I apologize for that. If we look at this as a downtown security and what Mr. Rudolph just talked about, can we do the entire thing with the 400,000? Because I'm thinking downtown security is a monthly cost. And if we manage to reduce the amount of people in our downtown area who are homeless, we won't necessarily need the security. So instead of 450,000, can we do the whole thing with the 400,000?
Your Worship, I think that's a valid point. I mean, obviously it would mean some incremental reduction in the level of service for security provision. We'd have to go back and figure out exactly what that converted to in terms of hours. But yes, if council wanted to proceed in that way, I think we could find a way to make that work.
I was just kind of thinking you just wouldn't need to do it in December or something like that and just knock it off at the end. So what you're suggesting is if we take the 50,000 out of the 400,000, it would lower our service throughout the whole thing.
Well, Your Worship, anything to clarify the point about security and seeing these people on the street? This is, again, a reminder of council, this private security is primarily nighttime security that's provided. So this would be augmenting nighttime, early morning hour private security in the downtown. So we go back to our contractor and we would have to reduce the amount of security in that time by $50,000. It would still be a significant increase over what we have now. Obviously, it wouldn't be as high as what we're currently proposing, but if that's council's preference, we would adjust the plan accordingly.
If I may, now I'm confused. If this is just for nighttime security and early morning, and most of the people that want to come downtown are coming down during the day, what effect will it be on the safety of people when they're in a downtown area? I mean, so what is the security doing at night then? I guess the question is.
Yeah, Your Worship, so during the day we have both BILE officers, RCMP bike patrol, which are present throughout the downtown during daytime hours. The original direction of having private security in the evening hours was to protect public and private assets, public assets in hours when people were primarily not in the downtown. What we find is that vehicles, the parkades themselves are an attractant, and as a result, the two people that we have each night spend the majority of their nights in those parkades. If we had additional capacity, they would be out beyond those parkades into areas up to and including the Old City Quarter, Victoria Crescent, other areas of the downtown, but basically keeping a presence in the downtown, observation in the downtown during those hours where there is less people downtown.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to speak very quickly on this. I'm with Councillor Bonner in the sense that this is going to do absolutely nothing for the homeless, and most particularly for those with mental health, addiction, and acquired brain injury, who I think anecdotally from what I hear and from what my own observation is, are the folks who are the source of the greatest public fear on the streets of our community. Having said that, as Councillor Martman rephrased it today and Councillor Thorpe earlier this week, sometimes you have to put the Band-Aid on the cut before you get to the surgery. If I thought there was an alternative, I would happily support it. There is no alternative. The fact is, if people do not feel secure staying overnight in town or going to restaurants or going to bars or pubs or whatever may be available for them for entertainment, or walking our streets or visiting their businesses to see if they're safe, etc., because they're terrified of doing so, all of the good work that's gone into this downtown of our wonderful city for decades is going to be wasted. So I don't think we have a choice. We are running about 25 minutes behind schedule now, so all those in favor of the motion? Any contrary? Councillor Brown, and I think that's it.
Could I?
Councillor Hemmens?
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion that the Finance and Audit Committee recommend to Council to add $50,000 from the Special Initiatives Reserve in 2021 to complete a comprehensive downtown safety plan.
Seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Given timing, Ms. Gurry, I'm going to suggest that we have lunch and come back for the other two items on this section of our agenda today.
Yes, Your Worship, perhaps if we tried to be back for 12:45, that gives about 20 minutes, and if not, whatever you choose, a 30-minute break if that's what you choose, to get back to get the remainder of the items done.
I'll suggest a compromise. We'll be back here and start promptly at 12:50, 10 to 1.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Leonard Krogh here. I'm here with Karen Lindsay today. She's going to show me how to sign up for our app.
Voyant Alert, the City of Nanaimo's emergency notification system. So we'll start by going into the App Store, Mayor Krogh.
Done.
Next, you're going to hit search. And you're going to search for the app, which is Voyant Alert. So it's VOYENT. Now you see, it's already selected it. Click there, hit get, and then we're going to install.
And why are we downloading this app?
We're downloading that so that you can get this onto your phone system, and what it will do is it will send you a push notification out. So if the City of Nanaimo issues an emergency alert, it will actually push the notification out onto your phone. The really nice part of this app is that it's anonymous, so it goes by postal code. So we're not requesting you to put your name or personal information in, it just works off of the app through your phone system. There are also, if you have family members or friends that maybe don't have a smartphone or would like another way, you can also sign up online or call our Public Works Department, and they have phone and texting options available as well. So there's lots of options for people depending on what their needs are.
Fabulous. So you can rest with some comfort knowing you can find out what's necessary and know that people who are important to you are notified.
Absolutely. So now you have Voyant Alert on your phone. And now just select open. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to tap in the postal code that it's prompting you.
All right. So
you just click on there and start entering. And then find on a map. So here you'll see the welcome page for the City of Nanaimo, and you want to subscribe to notifications, yes?
Yes.
Click that you agree to the terms, so click both to the yes for consent, and then hit next. And it's going to ask to either allow or not allow notifications, and you want to always allow.
Always allow.
Always allow. And the reason that is, if you don't allow, it won't push the notification out to you. So always allow.
Always allow.
And now you see here, you've got a message to accept that you've signed out. That's the two-factor authentication, and you're going to tap yes. And now you're in the system. Also, when you have a moment, we recommend that you pick your locations and sign up based on those locations, and then you'll get alerts from the City of Nanaimo.
Karen, thank you. Everyone, sign up.
Hey, Tiana.
Hey.
This sure is the coldest rink in town.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, buddy!
Nice save, James!
Wow, your goalie is keeping you guys in the game. Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, man, that's hot.
Sorry, that's the way I like it. Oh.
Go, 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 go!
Penalty shot!
Scalds from hot drinks are a leading cause of hospitalization for children under 5.
2 minutes, stand in the front, unsportsmanlike conduct.
Hot tea and coffee will cause serious burns to a child in less than a second.
Got a kid? Use the lid.
This is the 2018 redux of the lighting at Nanaimo's historic bastion. I've had the pleasure of being part of the relighting project on this amazing building in downtown Nanaimo. So what we did is we've replaced the original high-pressure sodium lights, which basically did an okay job of lighting up the bottom 10 feet of the building, and replaced them with modern LED lighting that has the capacity to change color. We can run through a number of different colors that we have pre-programmed here in a pink, a purple, a green. Probably my favorite on here is Rainbow Chase for Pride Week. It'll actually run all the way around the building all the time.
With this new technology, organizations can now request that the bastion be lit to promote their cause by going to the City Nanaimo website and following the instructions. Go to Your Government, Bastion Lighting Requests, complete the lighting request form, and submit. You will hear from us within a couple days if your request has been approved, and the bastion will be lit in the colors that you have requested. If you have any questions, please contact the Mayor's office at 250-755-4400.
So the next time you're in downtown Nanaimo at night, come on and check out the new dynamic lighting at the Bastion.
We're here today to make a couple street names. There was some vandalism in town, and we're just going to make a replacement. In the roads today, we're doing our Dundas Street and Bruce Avenue. They're all 8-inch, and we use 3 different sizes, mostly 24-inch, 32-inch, and 36-inch. We do use a consistent font with street names. This is actually my metal blank, so the only material here is the material that I actually will cut out in vinyl. From here, we have to take out the vinyl that's not needed. which is the outer. So all we want to do is save the inside border. From here, we actually have to put a transfer tape on it. And what this does is it allows us to take the blue vinyl and pull it away from the clear backing that it's on, so we can apply it to our aluminum blank. Now that we have our two sheeted piece of vinyl, we take our aluminum blank, which has high intensity diamond grade, which you can see behind me. We have all different colors. We have orange, yellow, white, depending on the type of signs. Most of our white signs are regulatory, and the yellow ones are warning signs. And right here, all I'm doing is pushing the transfer tape a little tighter to the vinyl. And then from there, we peel it back, our plastic, which basically leaves us with a big sticker. We put it on the aluminum. And when we're done here, we take our transfer tape off, and as you can see, we're left with Dundas.
Hi, Leonard Krogh here. I'm here with Karen Lindsay today. She's going to show me how to sign up for our app.
Voyant Alert, the City of Nanaimo's emergency notification system. So we'll start by going into the App Store, Mayor Krogh.
Done.
Next, you're going to hit search. And you're going to search for the app, which is Voyant Alert. So it's VOYENT. Now you see, it's already selected it. Click there, hit get, and then we're going to install.
And why are we downloading this app?
We're downloading that so that you can get this onto your phone system, and what it will do is it will send you a push notification out. So if the City of Nanaimo issues an emergency alert, it will actually push the notification out onto your phone. The really nice part of this app is that it's anonymous, so it goes by postal code. So we're not requesting you to put your name or personal information in, it just works off of the app through your phone system. There are also, if you have family members or friends that maybe don't have a smartphone or would like another way, you can also sign up online or call our Public Works Department, and they have phone and texting options available as well. So there's lots of options for people depending on what their needs are.
Fabulous. So you can rest with some comfort knowing you can find out what's necessary and know that people who are important to you are notified.
Absolutely. So now you have Voyant Alert on your phone. And now just select open. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to tap in the postal code that it's prompting you.
All right. So
you just click on there and start entering. And then find on a map. So here you'll see the welcome page for the City of Nanaimo, and you want to subscribe to notifications, yes?
Yes.
Click that you agree to the terms, so click both to the yes for consent, and then hit next. And it's going to ask to either allow or not allow notifications, and you want to always allow.
Always allow.
Always allow. And the reason that is, if you don't allow, it won't push the notification out to you. So always allow.
Always allow.
And now you see here, you've got a message to accept that you've signed out. That's the two-factor authentication, and you're going to tap yes. And now you're in the system. Also, when you have a moment, we recommend that you pick your locations and sign up based on those locations, and then you'll get alerts from the City of Nanaimo.
Karen, thank you. Everyone, sign up.
Hey, Tiana.
Hey.
It sure is the coldest rink in town.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, buddy!
Nice save, James!
Wow, your goalie is keeping you guys in the game. Cheers.
Oh, man, that's hot.
Sorry, that's the way I like it. Oh.
Go, 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 go!
Penalty shot!
Scalds from hot drinks are a leading cause of hospitalization for children under 5.
2 minutes, stand in the front, unsportsmanlike conduct.
Hot tea and coffee will cause serious burns to a child in less than a second.
Got it, kid? Use the lid.
This is the 2018 redux of the lighting at Nanaimo's historic bastion. I've had the pleasure of being part of the relighting project on this amazing building in downtown Nanaimo. So What we did is we replaced the original high-pressure sodium lights, which basically did an okay job of lighting up the bottom 10 feet of the building, and replaced them with modern LED lighting that has the capacity to change color. We can run through a number of different colors that we have pre-programmed here in a pink, a purple, a green. Probably my favorite on here is Rainbow Chase for Pride Week. It'll actually run all the way around the building all the time.
With this new technology, organizations can now request that the bastion be lit to promote their cause by going to the City of Nanaimo website and following the instructions. Go to Your Government, Bastion Lighting Requests, complete the lighting request form, and submit. You will hear from us within a couple days if your request has been approved, and the bastion will be lit in the colors that you have requested. If you have any questions, please contact the Mayor's office at 250-755-4400.
So the next time you're in downtown Nanaimo at night, come on and check out the new dynamic lighting at the Bastion.
We're here today to make a couple street names. There was some vandalism in town, and we're just going to make replacements. In the roads today, we're doing our Dundas Street and Bruce Avenue. They're all 8-inch, and we use 3 different sizes, mostly 24-inch, 32-inch, and 36-inch. We do use a consistent font with street names. This is actually my metal blank, so the only material here is the material that I actually will cut out in vinyl. From here, we have to take out the vinyl that's not needed, which is the outer. So all we want to do is save the inside borders. From here, we actually have to put a transfer tape on it. And what this does is it allows us to take the blue vinyl and pull it away from the clear backing that it's on, so we can apply it to our aluminum blank. Now that we have our 2 sheeted piece of vinyl, we take our aluminum blank, which has high intensity diamond grade, which you can see behind me. We have all different colors. We have orange, yellow, white, depending on the type of signs. Most of our white signs are regulatory, and the yellow ones are warning signs. And right here, all I'm doing is pushing the transfer tape a little tighter to the vinyl.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to recall the special meeting of the Finance and Audit Committee back. And Ms. Mercer, Halliburton Street sidewalk.
Thank you, Your Worship. So again, this is a housekeeping item regarding the Halliburton Street sidewalk project, and to change the funding from the Special Initiatives Reserve to Community Works. And that just provides more flexibility as the Community Works Fund has more specific funding requirements and the Special Initiatives Reserve does not.
Councillor Brown.
As we've spent a lot from the Special Initiatives Reserve today, I will move this motion.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmons. Any discussion? Councillor Bonner.
Sorry, we're not getting away that easy. My question is actually the person who can answer this probably is not here. So I'll pick it up some other time. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. Lovely. All those in favor? Any contrary? Seeing none, carried.
Okay, and our last item, excuse me, is regarding the earmarked funding in the Special Initiatives Reserve for the Health and Housing Task Force initiatives. And as it's earmarked in the reserve, as well as being included in the budget from general taxation. So we're looking for a motion to remove the earmarked reserve funding And just to note, just for clarification, so everybody is, I didn't mention this before, but the $480,000 is in the budget for 5 years only at this point. So when we bring the next budget back, it won't be in the final year of the budget. Just wanted to make that clear. But we're just looking for a motion to remove that earmarking.
Thank you. There's nothing like the wonderful pressure in an RDN meeting following a council meeting to get things rolling. Councillor Brown's moved. Councillor Hemmons is seconded. Any discussion?
I have a question.
A question, Councillor Brown.
It doesn't need to be answered immediately. I'm just wondering if we could get the new amount once this is all done of the Special Initiatives Reserve. Thank you.
Give us 1 second and we'll give you an updated. So Ms. Villa did some magic, and the balance is approximately about $3.7 million in there.
All those in favor? Any contrary? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you very much.
That is the end of the items we had for discussion. I'm not sure if the committee has anything that they would like to discuss at this point, but that is the end of the information that we had.
I don't see anyone. So the next is the, under reports, the 2020 annual financial statements. And Ms. Legan?
Your Worship, I'm sorry, just I'm not sure if Ms. Mercer wanted to finish. There was a few slides just on the next steps. Did she want
sorry.
to?
Nope, no
That's
worries.
okay.
In the slide deck, there was just a couple of slides on the balance in the Strategic Infrastructure Reserve. I won't go into any great detail. And we just went over the revised balance in the Special Initiatives Reserve. So our next steps, like I mentioned earlier, we will make all the changes that were recommended or approved today, and we will bring back the final financial plan amended bylaw for council to approve or give first 3 readings to on May 3rd, and then we'll bring it back on the 10th for adoption. So that meets our requirement to have it all done before May 15th. And at the same time, we'll bring our property tax bylaw as well. And that's the end.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the work of staff to get us to this juncture today. Councillor Bonner?
Your Worship, did we get a total now on our tax increase? I calculated 3.04.
It is just a titch under 3. So with rounding, it's 3%. We're at 3%.
No, it's under 3. We don't round up.
I like Ms. Mercer's calculation better than yours, Councillor Bonner. All right. If nothing further, thank you. Then on to 2020 annual financial statements. Ms. Legan.
Thank you, Your Worship. So there is a staff report for a decision today that the Finance and Audit Committee recommend that Council accept the 2020 annual financial statements for the City of Nanaimo. Having heard the auditor's opinion, we thought we would move along as we have a number of agenda items, and rather than do our brief presentation of recap, we would just like to take questions, please.
I think that's very wise. Are there any questions for Ms. Legan or any staff? I think we're satisfied, particularly after an audit. If we could have the recommended motion, Councillor Hemmons, seconded Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Any contrary? Motion carries. Thank you very much. We've already done 7B. On to 7C, Sir Oxman Stadium Outfield Fencing Project Update. Sorry?
Your Worship, there's one report on property tax due date.
Oh, yes, the due date. Sorry.
7B,
I am rushing. Yes, okay. Sorry, Ms. Legan.
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. Just before we move to that, I would like to recognize that Mr. Bailey is in with us, I believe. He's left. He puts a tremendous amount of work into the 2020 financial statements, and I wanted to recognize that he leads that process and through the audit, and he does a tremendous job for us. He was here for most of the morning.
Thank you. Duly noted.
The staff report for decision before you regarding property tax due dates is to put forward proactively an option for council to reduce burden on some of the businesses and give them the summer for revenue collection, for example, by shifting our tax penalty to be more heavily weighted at a delayed date. So keeping our first tax due date of July 2nd and applying only a 1% tax penalty, a 1% penalty to the amount owing for those that choose to take a, to pay at the September 10th date, which is an extended date. Normally it would be 6 weeks after July the 2nd, but we felt really strongly that this would be an opportunity to provide some relief, allow some of the businesses that are more seasonal to see the revenues through the summer. And this is a mechanism within our control. It is mandated that a 10% penalty be applied at some time, and we can change our dates. So we wanted to recognize those that are prepared to pay on July 2nd and those that need some extra time. So the recommendation from staff is to adopt that the property tax due date would be July 2nd, 2021, change the penalty to 1% for that date, and then extend the second property tax penalty due date to September 10th, 2021, and at that point apply the 9% that's required.
Thank you very much. Councillor Turley.
Yeah, just a point of clarification through you to Ms. Legan. So the property due date being July 2nd, and then it says change first property tax due to 1% on July 2nd. So that's anything from July 3rd through to September. It's not, if you're going to pay your taxes on July 2nd, you're not going to get dinged 1%. Is that, am I reading that right?
That is accurate, yes.
Thank you.
It's an incentive to pay by July 2nd.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone care to make the recommended motion or a question? Councillor Thorpe, rather.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I may, a question. I'm just curious, Ms. Legan, when we extended the dates this past budget year, what was the response on that? Did a lot of people take advantage of that leniency, or did we find that just about everybody paid on the original date anyway?
I don't have the exact statistics. We could put them forward. We did consult with Barb Wardle, Miss Wardle, who manages revenue services for us. She did not think that there was any downside to cash flow based on experience last year of extending the second date. So based on that, I would suggest that we didn't have a cash flow issue, but Ms. Mercer might have the statistics top of mind.
I don't have the exact numbers, but what we did find was our collection was consistent with previous years. So the majority of people paid by the due date, and some, we had a bit more that waited till just before the first penalty, but our tax flow or our cash flows were pretty consistent with previous years.
Well, that's interesting. Thank you. I'll make the recommended motion then, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Seconded, Councillor Turley. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any contrary? Motion carries. Thank you. Mr. Groot, you're going to do this Roxman Stadium, or Mr. Harding going to introduce you?
Thank you, Worship. I'll turn it over to Mr. Groot in a second. Just as a background, remember Council last year when we were doing the lighting project for this Roxman Stadium, and we also brought you the phased improvement plan. One of the issues we found was the safety issues with the existing fencing, particularly the back wall fencing, what's known as the Green Monster. So we had to remove that and then expedite some of the fencing components, which we did with also working with the society, which has contributed $150,000 for this project. Regardless of the funding that we had, for a variety of reasons, one being the COVID, some of the COVID pricings that we're receiving, the price was much more than what we had budgeted. So we have a few options for you that Mr. Groot will go through. Is also to make sure we had a season to go and proceed with the fencing, so a season could go or a partial season. We did move some existing funds around so we could award the contract to get the work started. But I'll turn to Mr. Gruden if there's any questions from council.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. I read through the report. Do we have an idea on how much we spent on the lighting? How much we spent on lighting? Okay. Reason I'm asking is if it's 1.2 million for lighting, and if I added all of these numbers up and the potential for a future cost, the fencing alone is going to approach $2 million. So we're spending $3.2 million on one ball field. And I'm wondering if this is a consistent amount of money that one would spend on a baseball field.
I initially would say it's a stadium and not just a ball field, so that's one, which we've agreed to have, a junior baseball team be there with the Night Owls. So there's definitely improvements that need to be done to make that a facility, not just for the Night Owls, but for all the other groups. And it is a facility that is old and needing a lot of upgrade. We knew that when we purchased it, but to acquire a 90-foot diamond in that area was still a great value for us to achieve. And then we knew when we brought the phase improvement plan to council, I think it was a year and a half ago or a year ago, there's a number of projects in there to bring it up to a certain standard. And so it is these things are expensive.
Okay, one other thing, if I may. The recommendation is to pay for some of this out of the asset management reserve. It's part of the fencing that they're referring to here. And I'm curious, it seems like we're building, I don't know if we're replacing fencing or building new fencing that we're paying out of the asset management reserve, which I thought was the reserve for replacing infrastructure. And I'll talk about it later on in another report where we talk about a bridge that probably could be taken out of the asset management reserve to be replaced, but it's not being there. I'm just wondering, why was the decision made to take this out of the asset management reserve?
Through your worship to Councillor Bonner, it's a replacement, it's a renewal as it's at the end of its life. So the asset management reserve would be an appropriate place to fund that from. Where we sometimes, if we have other options, if there's other reserves that we can fund projects through, and we will use those. But for anything that we're renewing or replacing at end of life, we have an option to fund from the asset management reserve. So if we have other options, we try to use those first and then the asset management reserve. So that would be why sometimes you might see a difference.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Your Worship. I saw this morning that the Night Owls canceled their season, so that's unfortunate. But one thing I was wondering, I remember when the original report was brought forward and there was quite a few items. I'm wondering, just like Bevin, if it, I'll be curious in the upcoming report here with the improvements, but if it makes sense, well, there might be, canceled seasons and things like this year to accelerate maybe some of the delivery of those improvements, just so we're avoiding disruption in future years. And I'm just wondering if that will be an options considered in the upcoming report.
Through your worship to Councillor Brown, absolutely. In the upcoming reports, that's what we'd see.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Move the recommendation. Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Hemmens. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any contrary? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is the Asset Management Planning Program. Ms. Legan.
Thank you, Your Worship. There is a staff report for decision in front of everyone. In fact, the next 4 agenda items are grant-related. This is grant-related. It is funding up to 50% of total project costs to a maximum of $15,000. And it is for the for the sanitary lift station condition assessment project under the UBCM Asset Management Planning Program. The total project is just over $36,000, and we're looking for support to make this grant application.
Moved by Councillor Bonner, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. No discussion. All those in favor? Any contrary? Seeing none, motion carries. The next is the Local Government Development Approvals Program. Ms. Legan.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's a staff report for decision in front of everyone regarding this grant application as well. I'd like to tie it back to the decisions taken earlier with respect to finalizing the 2021 to 2025 financial plan and the recommendations from the permit function report that came through. If we are successful with this particular grant, a significant amount of that would be funded through this. The recommendation on the table is that the Finance and Audit Committee recommend that Council direct staff to submit an application to the Local Government Development Approvals Program for the Development Approval Improvement Project and provide an overall grant management. And we do have Mr. Holmes with us if you have very specific questions, but you can see that the Ministry of Municipal Affairs has provided $15 million in funding, and the UBCM is administering this program. You can apply for up to 100% of funding of eligible projects, up to $500,000. We're talking about putting a program in place, which would be the software at $375,000, consulting services of $25,000, further consulting services of $50,000, and then consulting and legal services of $50,000 to which cumulatively are $500,000, and looking to make this application May 7th of this year. We're looking for your approval to do so.
Thank you very much. Moved Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Worship. I might have missed this, but is everything that is in this grant we were already going for and have budgeted for, and this would just get us some money back if we received it, or is anything on here dependent on the grant?
The legal services as well, yeah. 100% covered, yes.
Great, thank you.
Just our big Christmas list. All those in favor? Any contrary? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is the Canada Healthy Communities Initiative, second intake.
Thank you, Your Worship. You have a staff report for decision before you, and the recommendation is that the Finance and Audit Committee recommend that Council direct staff to submit an application to the Canadian Healthy Communities Initiative for the Maffeo-Sutton Playground Phase 2. This is the second intake of this particular program, and the first one was the ENN lighting that we put forward. We did look at staff looked at four potential projects: the Maffeo-Sutton Playground Phase 2, the Needham Street Sidewalk, Lenhart Bridge, and then Phase 2 of the lighting of the ENN Trail. Speaking specifically about the Maffeo-Sutton Park, the playground would become fully inclusive and accessible to all in Nanaimo. The city has already budgeted $663,300 for Maffeo-Sutton Playground Phase 2 in 2023. If the grant application is successful, the project would be accelerated into 2021, and the $413,300 would be funded from PILTS. So this particular grant has a maximum of $250,000. So it would be about a third, and this would be a fully accessible Phase 2 of the Maffeo-Sutton, which has been very successful to date.
Thank you very much. Moved Councillor Hemmens, seconded Councillor Thorpe. Any questions or discussion, everyone? It's a good long list of fine projects. Councillor Brown?
Thanks, Your Worship. This would probably be through to park staff, or Mr. Harding, sorry. What is the actual design? Are we looking at doing just another kit, a kit replacement, or are we going to be looking to do something more?
Thank you, Worship, to Councilor Brown. The goal here would be to do a little more of, not necessarily right out of the box, but we do definitely want to make it focus on the 2 to 5 year olds. So there are some opportunities for us to be a little different with this one. So I think one of the things you may be thinking of, not to imagine what you're thinking, but it's more the natural type of play. So we think we believe there's some opportunities for that on this one that we could use, and it gives us some time to make that happen.
Okay, perfect. On that note, exploring natural play spaces, I think, is where we need to go. So I will absolutely support this.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is my question regarding asset management come up, and I'm looking at the Lenhart Bridge Replacement Project, which is, I think, integral to connecting town site bike lanes through the park, because we're doing the work on the Bowen Park and connecting it up to Pine. So could this project come out of the Asset Management Reserve Fund? Is this how that would work? Could be?
Through your worship, to Councillor Bonner, if it's a replacement of an existing bridge, then yes, it could be funded from there.
Okay. My other question is, if we're moving this project forward and we do get the grant of $250,000, how are we paying for the other $400,000?
That would be funded through PILTs.
Oh, okay.
So you're talking about the Maffeo Sutton Park, or
Yes,
about?
Maffeo Sutton
Yes, that's
Park.
through PILTs.
Yeah, and don't PILTs, aren't they just part of our regular general revenue? I mean, it's just taxes in lieu of. I noticed they're mentioned a couple of times in the report, and I just thought that's just money that goes into our general revenue.
And the revenue comes in, and that sits in, for lack of a better term, a deferred revenue account. And it's used as a funding source as projects come up that are applicable. Yep. And so this PILT's just is payment in lieu of taxes, and we get this from the Port Authority. So that's the money that comes in from them. And it sits in a deferred revenue account and used as appropriate projects come up.
So as my favorite, it's earmarked for something else. I like that term. We should use it more often.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thanks, Your Worship. To the recommendation that's on the floor, I think I mentioned the other day during a meeting that I continually hear from people how impressed they are with the new improved Maffeo Sutton Inclusive Playground, the Phase 1. And every time I'm down there, I see it being extremely well used. And I've heard a number of people say that they look forward to the second phase for the younger age group children. So I totally support this. Thank you.
Excellent. No further discussion. All those in favor? Any opposed? No. Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is the Tire Stewardship BC Grant. Ms. Lagan?
Thank you, Your Worship. This is an information report. It's grant-related as well. We have already submitted the grant. This was the only project that was identified to be eligible for this type of grant funding. The deadline was March 31st. It was for $14,635 for the Harewood Centennial Park Accessible and Inclusive Playground Upgrade Project itself, and we just wanted to bring it to your attention as it has been applied for, and we will know mid-May if we've received the funding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next is the Van Cortlandt Economic Alliance 2021 Conference Sponsorship. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. We're here this afternoon to seek the committee's recommendation with respect to being sponsor for the annual Vancouver Island Economic Alliance. This is a conference I think you would all know has been held in Nanaimo for many years now, I think since the conference center here opened. The city has in the past been a sponsor of this, but not since 2017. The recommendation is to allocate $10,000, which would come from the money that's in your budget for the Economic Development Corporation for this year. So the $10,000 would come out of that $300,000 that's been set aside. Certainly, I think it's worth acknowledging that this conference happens every year in Nanaimo, and I think this year especially be an opportunity to showcase some of the work that we're doing on the economic development file. We have a note in the report that at this point we're not sure whether it'll be an in-person or virtual conference, but it is scheduled to happen in October of this year.
Thank you. Councillor Martman?
I'd like to move option 1, recommended.
Can I just ask a question first before we get to a seconder? Have we ever been the premier sponsor? There you go. Councillor Brown and I are alliances all over this place today.
Sorry, Your Worship, I'd have to follow up on that. I don't recall.
I don't think we have, but
I don't think we have, but I'd be cautious because although I think we really should do the platinum as we have before, to be premier this city is just too much over the top. That's just my personal opinion.
your modesty becomes you, Councillor Martin. I had a seconder, I believe it was Councillor Turley on the motion. Does any Councillor Bonner wishes to speak?
Yeah, just a question of how these things work again is, if this money has already been in the economic development plan, would they not make that decision? But we don't have a they yet. I'm guessing that's the reason why it's in front of us here, or would it always come to council to make a decision like that?
I think, Your Worship, moving forward next year, if the corporation set up, it's under their budget. I think the report notes in the past, the old NEDC would pay for that. So I think that would be up for discussion. It could be included in their budget moving forward. This year, the money's in the budget, but obviously because the corporation hasn't yet been established, we think there's some capacity to use it for this.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Seeing no further speakers, all those in favor of becoming a platinum sponsor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. We have no other business, Ms. Gurry. That means our 4 regional directors can get to their business. I would ask for a motion. Sorry, Council. Motion to adjourn, Councillor Hemmons, seconded Councillor Bonner. Thank you very much to staff today and everyone for their contribution and the speed with which we were able to stay within our time allotted. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.